The story begins with a beautiful black and yellow butterfly trying to sit on a palm outstretched in its direction. But to her great regret, the man's hand intercepted the insect and crushed it in his fist. The action takes place in the year 2036 in the city of Beiyuan, where a guy in a suit and with a blindfold is smoking on the roof of a building. The blonde must have been expecting something, for he looked at his watch and saw that it was 11:54. The man threw away the cigarette butt, shook his hands off the dead butterfly, and visibly prepared for something. He stood close to the edge of the roof and already had 1 foot above the city. The guy let go of his other leg and hovered on the edge of the roof. Later, a blond man in an interesting suit pushed himself off the surface of the building. Next, he flew stone-face downward, very fast and swift. Then in an instant, wings extended from the guy's back, with which he could control his flight. The guy was flying over the entire city, which he had a great view of from this flying height. But then the man decided to stop to show off a little to himself. The man didn't stay in that pose for long and was getting ready to fly away, but something happened. He was called out by another man who was approaching him. He called the blond man Panlos. The second flyer grabbed Panlos by the chest and guided him down. He was probably the one the blonde was waiting for on the roof. Hearing no greeting in return, the second man plowed Panlos into the asphalt, then even destroyed him around him. The man assured Panlos that he had come for him and asked him not to hurt the civilians. Blondie, on the other hand, explained that he had been looking forward to meeting the guy for a very long time, but unfortunately was now disappointed. Nearby rivals began to explode offices and houses, apartment complexes, almost all the buildings in the neighborhood were on fire. Amid the explosions of destruction, Panlos said he spent a great deal of time to place those explosives and let him know in advance the next time someone asks him to do so. The man's eyes were filled with hatred and anger. They were clearly demanding a release of emotion. The boy tried to punch the villain, telling him not to dare mock life, but Panlos managed to dodge. After Panlos had successfully dodged, he interrogated his interlocutor about the taunts. After snapping his fingers, Yemu flew far away from the villain who threatened to kill the guy, and his words were serious. The bullet fired by Panglos hit exactly in the hero's chest, but failed to pierce the guy's skin. Yemu reminded Panlos that ordinary bullets couldn't hurt him and was already preparing to take her out. Panlos clutched something in his hand, and added that he remembered that mere bullets would not harm a hero. The bullet started to make a strange sound, and Yemu tried to pull it out even faster. Panlos had preemptively howled at the impending explosion. It was even hard to believe that a small bullet could detonate like that. A whole bunch of dust and smoke. But in all this chaos, the silhouette in the center remained motionless. It was Yemu who was standing still after the explosion. He looked calm, although a small part of his clothes were burned. The man stood at the starting line as if he were preparing to run a marathon for speed. A moment passed, and the hero, leaving behind him a yellow light, was already in the air and chasing after Panglos. It didn't take long for the guy to find the villain, and they were soon able to bond in midair. Panlos asked Yemu during the fight if Yemu wondered why he was after Yemu specifically, since Beiyuan was still full of heroes. Yemu managed to land a strong punch to his opponent's jaw, and afterward he replied that the only thing he was interested in was getting rid of the guy's evil personality and putting him behind bars. Panlos took obvious damage from such a blow, and tried to assure the guy that he wasn't really evil. Afterward, he asked Yemu if he knew who killed his father and why he was still standing here. Yemu clearly didn't like those words and didn't want to hear anything about his father, much less tell him. The hero immediately punched Panglos once more in the face and shouted, asking the man not to even dare mention his father. Yemu then grabbed the villain and began smashing the remaining facades of the burned buildings with his body. Journalists with cameras and reporters appeared nearby. The TV channel showed Yemu flying with the Panglos, and the anchorwoman talked about the many explosions in the city at 12 o'clock on 17th Street. Here, Yemu managed to throw his opponent's body very hard into the asphalt once more. The helicopter camera continued to show the conflict between the two superhumans, and the anchorwoman explained that the villain Panlos attacked the city over and over again to fight the hero Yemu. The girl also added that after that, Yemu had still failed to capture the speedy opponent and was unable to stop the tragedy from happening in the city. The reporter was like accusing Yemu of something. She said that the hero was giving Panlos a lot of time to hide. Also, he said that it looks like the guy is trying to forgive Panlos to turn the place into a slum. Both superhumans were already almost spitting blood after their battle, but Yemu was on top of his opponent. Panlos decided to make an attempt to get through to Yemu. He told the one that the guy was hurt by those around him. He thinks he is a righteous man, and they are making a guard dog out of him, Beiyuan. Yemu wiped the blood from his lips and explained that he never cared about righteousness. He only kept justice in his heart. Panlos tried to say something, but interrupted himself and said the guy was quoting a character from an old movie. Panlos said concepts like fairness were never immutable. Whoever wins is fair. Afterward, the villain took out his hand and wanted to add something for Yemu. The blonde man admitted that this bunch of people were right about one thing after all, and she's right about Panlos having a personal grudge against Yemu. Panlos released a blue ray from his hand towards his opponent that was meant to harm Yemu. The hero managed to react in time and pulled out a huge rock from the underbrush. Panlos saw in his face a huge pile of stone slabs moving in his direction. The villain tried to fend them off so they wouldn't reach their goal and be able to break him. Yemu's foot was able to get through those rocks. The hero was definitely aiming for Panlos's face. And Yemu managed to achieve his goal. Once again, he was able to deliver a powerful blow to the villain's head. From such a blow, the villain's mask came off and part of his face that was not covered by hair could be seen. And then Panlos showed his whole face, which both mask and hair had ceased to conceal. Yemu most likely recognized someone from his opponent and froze for a few seconds in surprise. Yemu called Pangloss Ling Chen. He did so uncertainly and with a trembling voice. He didn't want to believe what he was seeing. The blonde stood and fixed his chin after Yemu's powerful punch. A bunch of thoughts appeared in the hero's mind. He mumbled about the past 10 years and said that Ling Chen couldn't be Pangloss. Ling Chen continued to fix his chin, and Yemu couldn't gather his thoughts and accept what had happened. Here Yemu decided to start by charging the guy that Ling Chen had lied to him. Ling Chen asked back questions, such as whether Yemu had seen him in recent years, or asked how he was doing, to which the hero claimed he couldn't suspect his friend. Ling Chen offered to continue after Yemu found out that he was the villain, and Yemu remembered about what Jiang Sao, Zhao's aunt, who promised to look after Ling Chen and now hates the hero, told him. Yemu asked the guy, did he just disappear and plan everything, to which he received an affirmative answer and asked another question, is Ling Chen happy with what happened? The guy hesitated for a very long time and thought over his answer. He first looked away from his interlocutor. Then Ling Chen looked the other way and said that he was not happy with what had happened. Ling Chen wants Yemu to die and tells him so right now without any hesitation. The injured Yemu stood in the middle of the debris that he and Ling Chen had made during the explosions and fight. The hero looked first to his right. There he saw a wreck, broken glass, and a lot of trash. But looking at it all, he remembered how in normal and peaceful times people walked there. Afterward, he looked already to his left. He saw too a lot of debris, broken glass, and residue from destroyed buildings. But in his recollection, there were kids there with their parents having a great time. Yemu withdrew a little from his thoughts and turned to Ling Chen to convey that after his father's death, the guy had always thought of helping and protecting. Even if one has to be called a hero and at the very end he gives up the idea, Panlos is no exception, Yemu continued. Ling Chen, ironically, standing with his back to Yemu, asked the great hero if he wanted to save him again. Yemu replied that of course he wants to save him, but he thinks death is the only way to save the guy. Ling Chen didn't give much interest to his opponent's words, but simply said that they finally agreed on something at least, and added that they would see each other in the other world. Yemu's yellow beam was directed towards his opponent and was preparing to destroy him, but the Blu-ray Panlos also began to fight off Yemu's forces, trying to finish him off. Ling Chen began to ponder the fact that everything was doomed from the beginning. Evil and justice, are they genetically installed in our blood? Or is it still a conscious choice made by man, thought Ling Chen. The guys continued to fight with their strength, and Ling Chen thought, some people say that in a place where there is evil, there is bound to be justice. In other words, there is no light without darkness, Ling Chen had already concluded. The guys' strengths were equal, and they had no way of knowing who would win. In his mind, Ling Chen kept saying that the hand he was looking for in the sky had finally appeared. Also, his voice spoke of childhood and school. Guys' memories carry over to high school, where someone says you can smile all you want, but don't laugh when you can't win. The teacher asked if the head teacher could write his homework on the board, to which he received the reply that he had gone to the restroom. In that case, the teacher asked to call Deputy Yemu, and the student in the first desk volunteered to look for him. The schoolboy stood up from behind his chair and called out to Yemu, trying to find him in the classroom. The guy finally found the guy and asked Yemu what the guy was doing and said the teacher called him. Afterward, the guy with glasses headed towards Yemu to hear the answer from him closer. Yemu stood surrounded by his classmates and female classmates. He assured the boy that he would be right over. That's when another guy took notice of all this. It was young Ling Chen. Ling Chen was clearly dissatisfied with something, and looking at the company asked, "What is this?" There was a lesson going on in the classroom, and all the students were listening attentively to the teacher. Ling Chen was obviously thinking about something and muttering to himself, to which a classmate asked if he was all right. The schoolboy seemed to explode at the words of his classmate. He jumped up from his desk and exclaimed that it was unthinkable. The guy found a marker and quickly took the cap off the end of it. He probably wanted to write something. After Ling Chen took the marker, he immediately headed towards the window, ignoring all of his classmates. Everyone looked at the kid with wonder and bewilderment as he wrote his theorem right on the classroom window. The teacher immediately resented this and urged Ling Chen to immediately return to his seat, especially if he was not following the school's general program. The teacher kept yelling at the kid and reprimanding him for the mess, but he paid no attention and continued to write numbers and equations on the window. The boy shrieked back, to the incomprehensible and confused teacher, that he had written a positive number. The guy started telling me that the space vectors are orthogonal to each other. This would be the Dirac function. And the state function satisfies the Schrödinger wave equation. Then by separating the variables, we get the equation of evolution in an invisible time state. Which means the only correct answer, and it's a positive number, the guy kept saying, placing his palm on the theory window. The students began to write down the guy's words and listen to him attentively. Ling Chen concluded that his calculations were correct. Some guys who were sitting in class were asking each other what Ling Chen was talking about, Naruto or chakra. Ling Chen looked disdainfully in their direction and called them Viabu. The teacher demanded Ling Chen to go back to her seat and return the marker. At that time, the guy was looking in the nightstand of her desk for some kind of weapon and said that it was probably a dream. The teacher was getting angrier by the second. Ling Chen said that she kept calling his name, but he couldn't remember the teacher's name. In front of the angry and humiliated teacher, the guy started trying to remember her last name. Ling Chen moved away from the teacher's desk and started walking between the desks and looking for something from the students. He also assumed that he had been sent back in time and he would find out why. He fumbled for something in his classmate's pencil case and started pulling it out. He also said he finally found what he was looking for. It was a clerical knife. The guy looked at it and said he needed to do something. He ominously stood in front of Yemu and leisurely turned around, looking eerie. Yemu, on the other hand, sat there and didn't understand what his classmate wanted from him, much less why he had taken the knife. Ling Chen had already completely turned his body towards Yemu and headed towards his desk. The guy was already close and seemed to be preparing something untoward and creepy. Ling Chen swung his knife and resolutely shouted that he wanted to finish what he had started. The knife headed towards Yemu's face, who still didn't understand such a reaction from his friend. The stationary knife in Ling Chen's hands was already preparing to finish off the schoolboy. He had only seconds to live. But then Ling Chen was interrupted by someone from behind. He was grabbed by his shoulder and prevented from finishing what he started. That someone lifted the guy above the floor and kept Yemu from dying. That someone turned out to be the teacher, who pushed the guy away from Yemu and continued to hold him in the air. A teacher with a schoolboy in hand stood at the exit and told all the children that this lesson was being taken out for independent study. The classmates started whispering. They remembered that Ling Chen used to be gloomier than a cloud, and now he didn't look like himself. Another schoolmate suggested that the guy just drank the wrong medicine. Ling Chen imagined himself as if he was behind bars and assured himself that it was worth the wait, and he would kill everyone when he got out. The guy was taken to the teacher's lounge where everyone was busy doing their own thing, and no one paid attention to him. Ling Chen began to examine himself, and came to the conclusion that his body was now very weak, and he would not be able to defeat Yemu. He looked at the teacher who was on the phone and took stock of the fact that even she was stronger than he was at the moment. The teacher sighed heavily and finished talking on the phone before turning back to the guy. The woman explained that she called Ling Chen's home and his uncle said he didn't have time to come get his nephew. The boy was surprised by something and looked away from the teacher. Ling Chen grabbed his knees and was a little flustered in front of the instructor. The woman sat across from the boy and said that she understood his plight, but if he wanted to be free from hardship, he should study hard for a better life. The boy wasn't pierced by the teacher's words and looked in her direction without much interest. The teacher saw that Ling Chen didn't care and assured him that he would regret it one day. Ling Chen asked the woman if she really thought so and gazed towards the clock that stood nearby. He added that he only needed to wait for a couple of seconds. The hand of the clock was rapidly approaching the right time. The clock was already showing Ling Chen's estimated time when something should happen. And then they went over the right mark, and the second hand went on. The teacher and student looked toward the clock, but nothing happened. The guy asked the teacher if he could see something. The startled woman tried to ask the guy what he was even talking about. Ling Chen confidently told him that he couldn't regret anything in the future, because the future him would return to the past with a time machine to stop him. He once again questioned the teacher if she could see that nothing had happened. The teacher looked into the guy's eyes and didn't realize how she should react to something like that. The woman took her head and asked the guy if he had read any science fiction books lately. The teacher also added that looking at the guy's progress in his studies, if a time machine were to appear anytime soon, the guy wouldn't be able to afford it. The boy was clearly amused by the instructor's words and he interjected, "Afford?" Without waiting for an answer, he said that if there was ever going to be such a machine in this world, it would be because of him. Just then, the guy thought a bit about what he had said and was getting ready to leave the place. The teacher covered her eyes and said that at least for Ling Chen, this was a good sign, because he used to be a fool who didn't listen to lectures. But she didn't have time to finish. The girl opened her eyes and saw her student leaving the office. She tried to scream to stop him, but failed. The guy was already walking through some slum-like neighborhood. He couldn't believe that he would ever have to return to this harsh, dirty, and cursed place. The guy picked the code to the lock that weighed on the grate and kept thinking about the fact that it was deep in his memory. He muttered to himself that it was the lock that had succeeded in opening again and pulled back the bars. The guy walked further into the cramped room and kept talking to himself. He never thought that his universal quantum weapon would transport his consciousness to the past. Maybe it was due to a glitch, but definitely not an accident. He sat down at his laptop and convinced himself that this wasn't a dream or an illusion. The guy came to the conclusion that he was back for real, and so it made some kind of sense. Ling Chen visualized his friend's corpse and said to himself that he would kill Yemu this time. Ling Chen continued to stare at his laptop and mull over his plans. He saw that it was now the year 2019, which meant that even if Ling Chen was now weak to defeat the hero, he could still win because the hero had not yet awakened his strength. Ling Chen lit up at this idea and said that this time, killing Yemu would be easy this time. But then someone knocked on the guy's room. Ling Chen suspected something and asked who the other one was, then stood up from his laptop. He opened the door and what he saw surprised the guy a little. Auntie May stood in front of him and asked Ling Chen, "What is he doing here?" There was a birthday cake on the table with a candle with the number 17 in it. Auntie May was offering Ling Chen to taste and appreciate the birthday cake. But later, Auntie remembered that the birthday boy must first make a wish and blow out the candles. The boy couldn't look at his aunt. Something was clearly bothering him. The aunt watched and kept catching Ling Chen's surprised looks at her. The guy was trying to say something. He got up from the table and asked his aunt if she was alive, his voice shaky and unsure. The aunt stood in shock. She almost turned blue from such a question, and Ling Chen stood beside her and waited for the woman's reaction. Aunt May grabbed the guy by the ear and called him a jerk for asking such a thing. The woman obviously did not like the nephew's question, and asked him not to talk like that to his uncle, who would be back soon, after which she offered to cut the cake. Behind the guy's back, a man's shoes flew and someone could be heard coming home. The angry man asked Aunt May where she hid the money this time. Aunt May covered her nephew with her body and motioned for him to go to his room. Ling Chen didn't really want to listen to his aunt's advice and just stood there watching everything. The man began to accuse Aunt May of running out of all their money. The man rolled up his sleeves and said he remembered exactly the 4,000 yuan they had left. He further asked where it was. Auntie May said that she was the one training Ling Chen and the man promised not to touch that money. The man demanded to give him the 4,000 right now and assured him that he would choose where Ling Chen should train. The woman said the man said the same thing last time, so she won't give him the money this time. They can't be late with tuition payments. The man clearly didn't like Zhao Mei's answer and looked in her direction with angry eyes. The man rolled up the sleeves of his shirt and it looked like he was preparing to beat the woman. May herself put her hands in front of her to fend off attacks from the man, but she was still nervous. But then the man dropped to his knees. It was as if he felt sick and couldn't even swing toward May. The man promised Zhao Mei that he would do anything for their family. The man hugged May's legs and said that he was aware of the fact that the girl had been working for the past few years, and he had only been drinking, eating, and doing nothing. He snuggled closer to his spouse and said that once luck turned his way, they could get 3 or maybe 4 times as much money. May told Zhu Yuan that out of the 10 bets he made, 9 of them didn't play. They couldn't afford another one. The man continued to pitifully ask May for money. He said it was worth believing in him this time. May also hugged her husband and asked him not to bet again. Even if Yuan won, it would be much less than what the man had already lost. They could save that money and just spend time with their family, the woman added. The man definitely didn't like the distrust from his spouse this time, and tears abruptly disappeared from his eyes. Yuan stood up to his full height and punched his consort very hard in the face. The woman flew into the holiday table, flipping it over. She felt the full force of the impact. The man said he was always aware of May only despising him because he earns less than her, but the woman herself denied it. Ling Chen stood and looked at all of this without much emotion. It was as if he was not surprised at all. Yuan looked towards the guy and said that he knows about the man crippling Zhao Mei. Now she is depending on him. Yuan mercilessly banged May's head against the tiles in the kitchen. In addition to banging his head against the tiles, he added blows to the woman's face with his left hand to vent all his anger. Ling Chen looked at this, and he clearly didn't like what was happening. He wanted to take revenge on his aunt's abuser. Then the aggressive drunkard's gaze fell on the cake that lay beside the overturned table. His hand reached for a cake that was being prepared for his nephew's birthday, and he also told the woman that she should not buy expensive products if they were not meant for him. In Ling Chen's hands, he could see a stashed knife that he had managed to steal from the table. The man started shoving pieces of cake into the woman's mouth and forced her to eat what she had made. Yuan again started asking for money and bullying the lying and beaten girl, and the girl asked him to stop. Ling Chen finally pulled out a knife from his sleeve and watched his uncle mercilessly beat up May. He horrifyingly approached with a knife outstretched at Uncle Yuan's back as if he was going to stab him. The man himself noticed something amiss and sensed someone behind him. He turned around. Ling Chen extended the knife with the hilt forward to the man and offered to take it. Yuan didn't understand what his nephew was implying now, and was wary of picking up the knife. Ling Chen looked contentedly at this whole scene and asked his uncle to finish Mei off with a knife. Ling Chen continued to stand with a kitchen knife in his hands while the adults figured things out. The boy couldn't stand his uncle's indecision and put the knife in his hands himself. Ling Chen pointed the knife towards Mei with Yuan's hands and asked to slit her throat or just stab her in the heart. The man hesitated. He wasn't ready to kill someone, but the guy asked if that was what he wanted originally. Ling Chen pressed much closer to his drunken uncle's ear and asked him to kill his aunt. The man could not withstand such pressure. Even though he looked drunk, he still threw the knife out of his hands and it fell to the floor. The guy stepped closer to the man who was already on his feet and wanted to say something to him. Ling Chen called the shocked uncle a pathetic pissant and added that he didn't even deserve to be killed. Yuan decided not to tolerate such insults against him and slammed the young man's head against the wall. Ling Chen fell to the floor from such a blow, and it was obvious from his eyes that he couldn't stand up to the drunken uncle right now. He realized that comparing it to his past life, it wasn't that bad yet. Yuan swung around to once again hit the lying schoolboy, but he was stopped by Mei, who said the man could kill the guy. The man still managed to wrestle his fist from Auntie Mei's hands, but he still couldn't hit his face. Ling Chen parried the blow with his elbow. The guy lay beaten and covered his face with his hands so as not to be badly injured. Something made Yuan stop. He looked at his nephew and tried to make sense of what he had done. The man told Ling Chen that he would spare him today and let him go, after which he got off the guy. Auntie immediately crawled over to her nephew, and the outgoing Yuan asked to pack his things quickly, for the landlord would be coming soon. The woman tried to learn something from Ling Chen, or at least see signs of life in him. The knife remained in the guy's hands, which Zhao Mei continued to stare at with an eerie gaze. The boy brought the knife up to his face and began to stare intently in his aunt's direction as well. Ling Chen's face changed dramatically. He smiled and said that this knife was fake. Later the guy, in order to prove his words, started trying to stab himself in the head, but he understandably failed. Zhao Mei commendably stroked her nephew's cheek and asked the one when he had time to switch the knife. The guy didn't say exactly how he did it, only stating that he had very fast hands. Auntie Mei told the guy that if his uncle found out that it was fake, he would get even more angry. But Ling Chen assured him that he wouldn't get angry. The boy began to tell his Aunt Mei a story. The story begins with how once upon a time there was a king who ruled a rich and stable country near the sea. Once his most faithful and devoted wizard foretold that when the golden star burns again in the sky, then, my king, your death will come. The angry and frightened king wanted to avoid a tragedy, so he took men and food, after which he went to the mountains. Time flowed and supplies began to run low. In desperation, the king began to go mad and began to eat his men and drink their blood. To save the remaining people, the queen gave the king a drink of her blood, to which she had added poison beforehand. The king drank the poisoned blood of the queen and died instantly. On this day, the golden star rose to the heavens again. The aunt listened to her nephew's story and said she felt sorry for the king, to which the lad replied that he was a complete idiot. He couldn't be pitied. Ling Chen continued his thought. He said that the king was strong and powerful, but instead of fighting fate, he preferred to sit back in the mountains. Even if he was given the prophecy by the wizard, he could still not die. But listen to the wizard's clue. Auntie Mei asked the guy where they should go. After all, school was not over yet. And Ling Chen thought that if the knife turned out to be real, it would all be over. Yuan could kill his aunt at any moment. The guy had flashbacks of how Mei had really been stabbed. He'd given up on everything because of her death, and everything had gone somewhere wrong. Guy couldn't forget her as the second king of a separate country. Time is a confusing thing. One way or another, everything goes at the same speed, in different directions. But after his rebirth, the guy had already changed the event that was about to happen. The guy promised himself to change everything from now on that he could and that he could. The action shifts to the school that Ling Chen left class with yesterday. Two boys tried to scrub off what Ling Chen had written on the window, but they failed. The angry teacher asked them to buy soap and solvent. Some girl walked over and started calling out for a teacher named Sunshiki. The woman immediately turned around. The girl told me that a reputable teacher from a polytechnic school came to see their math class. The teacher immediately recognized him as Professor Liu Bushui and was outraged that he decided to come today. The woman started yelling at her students to quickly scrub Ling Chen's theorems and equations off the window. She remembered and cursed Ling Chen, but then something interrupted her. It was as if she noticed someone. The man began to scrutinize the formulas on the window, and Sunshiki immediately recognized him as the famous Professor Liu Bushui. Liu Bushui asked the girl to shut up, putting his index finger to his lips. The man went back to the formulas and talked about how they were without a single flaw and just perfect. He turned back toward the teacher and said it was just graceful. It was as if he immediately attacked the girl with a question about who wrote it. Sunshiki immediately admitted that it was her student. The man, after a short question about the guy's name, heard that it was Ling Chen. The professor repeated the guy's name longingly. He clearly wanted to talk to him. He kept running his palm over the formulas and theorems and repeating to Ling Chen. And in the end, he said he'd finally found the right genius. Ling Chen was in his room doing something on a small machine, and thought about the fact that if his aunt was still alive, he needed to think through his actions more carefully, and be careful about what he wanted to do. Imu has to die anyway, but once the guy does, the police might intervene, and when they start investigating, the situation might get out of hand. Luckily, when the guy was a Panlos, he had a lot of fans. His fans even joked that if Panlos was 800 years younger, he could have killed Yamu. The boy turned his attention to the calendar and realized that he had indeed gone back in time to those 800 years younger. And if Ling Chen himself can't do it, then he has another plan. There were pictures hanging on the guy's wall, and he said if he couldn't do it himself, these people could. The first was the girl the guy hung in the center. The girl was already sitting down and smoking a cigarette. She turned to Ling Chen to ask what he wanted. She also asked the guy how he found her. Ling Chen had a flashback where the girl explained that no one would find you in a slanted alley even if you were drunk and unconscious, because everything there looked like trash. The girl also added that she herself used to go to the slanted alleys when she was young. The girl didn't wait long and asked the guy if he wanted her to kill someone. The girl's name was Hui Mei, and she immediately explained that minors get a raise. The guy asked how much she wanted. The guy saw the open palm in front of him and said 50,000. It was even less than he had counted on, but he was frustrated by Mei saying it was 5 million. The guy snatched the paper from the girl's hands and said goodbye. He clearly didn't like the price tag. The guy was already working with welding. He realized that money could even open the dead woman's eyes, but add another 5 million and he could buy himself a decent house. Ling Chen realized that no one would work unless you paid a lot of money. But he looked at his wall again. A picture of a bald guy caught his eye, and he thought a bald man could pull it off. He has 2 positive traits. Firstly, he acts very carefully, and secondly, murder is his hobby, and he will not take money. Ling Chen met the hitman at the temple. He was offering to buy incense to go inside and change his fate. Ling Chen was displeased. He apologized and went far away from this temple. The guy was already in town and wondered if he could even rely on anyone right now. He sat next to the basketball court and realized he could only rely on the last one off his wall. His codename is H, his gender is unknown, his age is also a mystery, and the guy himself doesn't even know what he looks like without the mask. He looked at the drawing and realized that finding the killer would be very difficult. Just then, someone snatched the picture out of Ling Chen's hands while he was thinking about searching for the hitman. The exasperated boy turned around to see who dared to distract him from his thoughts. But seeing this man, he immediately cooled down and even got a little embarrassed. It was a girl in a basketball uniform. Ling Chen immediately recognized her as Jiang Xiao. Jiang Xiao decided to tease the guy and said that if it was the object of the guy's affections, she looked unkempt, to which Ling Chen asked the girl to get off his back. Jiang Xiao asked the guy why he was spying on Yamu yesterday. Did he decide to dig his own grave? But Ling Chen didn't want to answer anything. Jiang Xiao remembered that the guy said he didn't want to show that he was sick. Ling Chen didn't understand what the girl was talking about and asked her about it. The girl asked Ling Chen, "What is he going to do now, being sick and beaten up? Isn't he trying to grow up faster?" She put a band-aid on the guy's wound and told him to hold still. Her grandmother always said that in order for things to heal faster, you had to say it out loud. The girl started drawing a line on the guy's band-aid she had just glued on. The guy recalled Jiang Xiao's words that spoke of the peach tree. The girl in the boy's recollection said that the blossoming of the peach tree was always accompanied by a fall of petals. The girl drew a second dash on the band-aid and it turned out to be a cross. The pair in one voice continued and complimented each other with the words that ended the girl's phrase about the peach tree, namely giving birth to new petals. Jiang Xiao was surprised that the guy knew this proverb and asked him where he heard it. There was a basketball flying near the couple. The projectile hit right in the back of the head of the guy who was looking towards Jiang Xiao. The guy put up a hand to fend him off. The ball had already touched Ling Chen's hand, but it didn't work out for the guy. The basketball flew too hard and knocked the guy on his back. The guy fell down and the culprits came over. The fact that the ball flew into the guy while Jiang Xiao helped Ling Chen up. One of the bullies ironically apologized and said he accidentally missed. The guy also quietly called Ling Chen a weakling. Ling Chen looked at all of this with a disgruntled and resentful look, but did nothing. Jiang Xiao clearly didn't like this, and she went to the bullies and asked the ones why they threw the ball at the injured guy. But the ones only asked her why she was bothering with falling in love with this loser. Ling Chen got to his feet and held the ball in his hands. He said that he was fine, trying to calm Jiang Xiao down. He held the ball out toward the bully who was aiming for his head and offered to take it. The bully held out his hand and thought that Ling Chen wouldn't want to mess with him. But the kid lifted the ball over his head, away from the hands of the bully. The bully tried to take the ball again, but Ling Chen took it away this time as well. The bully was already at the limit of his anger and tried again to take the ball away, but he failed. The big guy pinned the guy against the wall and asked the guy, was he going to mess with him? Ling Chen slapped the senior's face with the ball. The kid was clearly satisfied with what he had done, But the bully's limit came out, and he punched the guy in the stomach after all the bullying. Ling Chen twisted from the blow, and the bully asked if his parents had taught him that elders should be respected, or if he should be taught a lesson himself. Ling Chen didn't get discouraged and didn't fall off his feet after being hit hard by the bully, and even looked quite normal. He ran his finger next to his ring, hoping something might happen. The high school student taunted Ling Chen, who had just been made to curl up with a single punch. But then he noticed something amiss, as if some shadow was falling over him. Here already, the high school bully was not on a joke frightened. Something was falling on him very quickly. The flagpole was falling on the high school student. He did it very quickly, leaving him no chance to dodge. Immediately, everyone on the playground turned toward the incident, especially the bully's friends. One of them asked Ling Chen what happened, to which he received the reply that they were just standing around chatting, and the flagpole fell on him. Jiang Xiao clearly suspected the guy of something and looked at him doubtfully. The people immediately went to help the bully get out from under the huge tube, while Jiang Xiao and Ling Chen were about to leave. Jiang Xiao asked the guy how he did it, insinuating that it was Ling Chen who helped the flagpole fall down, but the guy pretended not to know what he was talking about. Ling Chen decided to take a look at how the injured person was being helped. He saw something that shocked him a little, but interested him nonetheless. It was a tattoo on the guy's torso that was telling Ling Chen something. In Ling Chen's flashback to when he was still panlos, the guy tells H that this time his opponent will be much stronger than he was before. H listened, but also expressed his confidence that no one could beat him. There was a portrait of Yemu next to it. H ran his hand over it and said that if it was him, it was possible. Panlos assured him that Emu couldn't kill the guy. H sat down on the table and asked what would happen next and what his next mission was. Panlos, on the other hand, suggested that he rest, stay home, and take a short break. H was not in agreement with this suggestion and said it was fine. Killer likes killing people. He had the same tattoo as the bully on the basketball court. Already in real time, Ling Chen orders a flatbread with fruit for himself and asks for coriander to be added. Ling Chen realized that he couldn't rely on one tattoo after all. It might not only be H's, but the guy simply had no other clues. Just then, Yemu approached the guy from behind. Ling Chen noticed him but didn't want to pay attention. Yemu tried to draw attention to himself and started coughing so that Ling Chen turned around in his direction. Ling Chen was not particularly happy to see Yemu, so he asked him to stay away from him. Yemu pretended that he didn't expect to see Ling Chen here. He said that it was a great coincidence to meet him here. Yemu told the guy that he just came here for something to eat. Ling Chen told the guy that his house was 10 kilometers away, and Yemu asked how did he know. Yemu said that Ling Chen's flatbread looked appetizing and asked to try some. Ling Chen held out the flatbread to Yemu's face and said that there's coriander in here. The guy refused as he was allergic. The guys walked on. Ling Chen was in no mood to talk to Yemu and tried to walk further away from him. Ling Chen regretted that he wasn't panlos right now, because in that case, he would crush Yemu on the spot like a moth. Ling Chen crumpled the tortilla wrapper with anger. He was scratching his head and wondering how to start a conversation with his friend. Yemu didn't think long and said that he lied to the guy. He caught up with Ling Chen and said that it was actually not a coincidence, and he had come here to see a friend. Yemu was about to say something to the guy, but he was interrupted and not even allowed to start his sentence. Ling Chen interrupted the guy and asked him to recall what happened in class, how he waved the knife in front of Yemu's face before he wanted to say something. Yemu thought about what Ling Chen had said and realized that it was most likely not an accident. Yemu said he thought for a long time about why his friend wanted to kill him. After all, the guy has a lot of friends at school, and Ling Chen is better than any of them. The guy also asked Ling Chen in the end, is that guy his friend or his enemy? The guy's conversation was interrupted by hooligans who were in a big hurry to get somewhere. Ling Chen began to examine what had happened and suspected something amiss in the bandits' actions. They were hanging around each other. Their backpack was stuffed with something. Empty streets and alleys, the guy tried to remember something. Apparently, Ling Chen had guessed something and was about to tell. But then he was interrupted by Yemu. He asked the guy to say whatever he wanted, but he would still follow him. Yemu suggested that there might be something illegal in the boy's backpack. The bag bandits were clearly up to something, maybe a holdup or a robbery, maybe just stealing money, even clearing the street for a comfortable escape. Also, the bandits deliberately avoid the place, though they continue to stare in that direction. The boys remembered the hospital in one voice and met their gazes. There was an explosion above the heads of the guys on the upper floors of the hospital, and they immediately looked over there. Ling Chen thought that this was impossible after all. In his past life, this hospital had never exploded. The only thing known about this hospital is that there was only one doctor in it. It's not just an explosion. They're trying to use it as a cover for something. Someone in the crowd started yelling and calling for help. The hooligans tried to snatch the bag from the hands of the frightened poor man in the crowd. Yemu said that this was unacceptable. Ling Chen tried to stop him and pointed out that the building had just exploded and he was already flying inside. Just then, an idea popped into Ling Chen's head and he realized something. He took Yemu's hand to stop and say something to him. Ling Chen said that he would stay here and Yemu should go inside the hospital. Yemu asked if it was possible, and Ling Chen asked the guy not to worry about him. Saving the innocent residents was more important. Yemu started to run away from the guy and thanked him for his advice. Ling Chen waved for Yemu to go on his way. The guy smiled and replied Yemu that he was always happy to help. He thought that today luck was finally on his side. Ling Chen imagined killing Yemu and told himself not to let it be for panic. Here we have him as the villain. Anything could happen in this kind of chaos. If Ling Chen is lucky, there may still be bombs in the hospital. The guy really wants to say Yemu goodbye. Yemu shouted to Ling Chen. He wanted the guy to help him contact the class teacher. He asked to tell her that there was an explosion in the hospital where Huang Wu was lying. Yemu also added that Huang Wu should still be there and pointed his fingers in the direction of the hospital. Ling Chen realized who he was talking about and thought it meant that H was currently inside the hospital. The story returns a couple minutes before the explosion. The guy opens his phone and texts someone that he was admitted to the hospital today, whereupon 800 yuan is sent to his account. The hooligans were telling Huang Wu that they could tear that kid into a British flag if he asked them to. They had just seen him around here not too far away. The injured Huang Wu was out of his mind with anger. He was preparing to take revenge on Ling Chen. There was a rumble and everything started bouncing around the room. The guys were shocked and thought it was an earthquake. Just then, a scared nurse came running in and shouted that someone had planted a bomb in the hospital. The guys were perplexed by the situation. The bullies abandoned their friend and said they had to run, but the man tried to stop them. Huang Wu realized that he'd gotten out too far behind his bunk and tried to stay on top of it. But unfortunately, along with everyone in the room, the guy with the cast on his leg also couldn't stay in one position and fell to the floor. Huang Wu lay there and looked angrily towards the door. He didn't like being abandoned by everyone at such a difficult moment. There was a pile of debris, shrapnel, pills, and other damaged property around the hospital. At the sound of the siren, the guy on crutches still managed to find the strength to walk down the hallway. In addition to broken objects, he also saw people dead under the rubble and others running away somewhere. Young men were running down old men, and everyone was looking for a way to survive so as not to die under the rubble or burn in a fire. A little girl stood in the middle of the ruined corridor and roared loudly, even interrupting the siren. Huang Wu clearly recognized something in this. He felt scared when he noticed the girl. Just then, Ling Chen walked up to the guy's back and asked him if he liked what he was seeing with his eyes right now. Huang Wu wanted to turn around and object to the insolent man who came up behind him, but the guy didn't have time to turn around before Ling Chen grabbed his face. Ling Chen asked Ike to look carefully and tell him exactly how he was feeling right now. Huang Wu didn't want to answer the guy's questions, so he just sent Ling Chen away. Ling Chen wasn't going to back down and once again asked the guy, what was he feeling right now? The boy's eyes went blank and he replied that he hadn't felt anything for a long time. Huang Wu's memories began, where he is a little boy standing in the middle of the forest in the fall. He is called out by the voice of some little girl who calls him brother. It was the guy's sister with a toy in her hands. She wanted to spend time with him, but she saw something that could have shocked her. You could see in her eyes that she was scared. Huang Wu was holding a dead bird in his bloody hands and another bird lay beside him. The girl was clearly frightened by what she saw and turned pale at her brother's atrocity. Huang Wu realized that this was not something his sister should see, but there was nothing he could do about it anymore. The girl dropped her toy and ran away from her brother. After a while, Huang Wu's sister died. She was still just a child. The boy stood over the casket with his sister and held back tears. In his hands was the same dead bird with which his sister had seen him, whereupon she was frightened and ran away. He placed the corpse of the bird next to the face of his dead sister. The guy cried for a very long time at the funeral, and everyone thought it was because he was very sad. In reality, little Huang Wu was simply afraid of himself. The guy caused the death of his sister, and after realizing this, he continued to live in this world. This incident showed that the strong will survive, and the weak will die. Huang Wu killed his sister in a similar way to the bird. The boy's fists clenched tighter, ashamed of his thoughts. If anyone knew the feelings of the guy who still remembers that look in his sister's eyes. Huang Wu remembered hitting Ling Chen. He had always tried to hide and keep his feelings inside. The violence he wanted to stifle the urges to kill people and chop them apart. However, it was not enough. Ling Chen took the guy's hand and said that he had never been oppressed, it was just in his blood. He put a ring on Huang Wu's hand and added that he was born that way. Ling Chen pointed the guy's finger in the direction of the hooligans who had fled from his chamber. Ling Chen stood behind Huang Wu and said to the fact that he simply had no choice. Ling Chen continued to hold Huang Wu's hand and pressed the ring he had put on the guy's finger. A beam from this ring struck near the ruins and shattered the ruins, which clearly frightened them. Ling Chen finally took his hands off Huang Wu and told the man that he would handle it from here. Huang Wu's friends asked him to wait and resolve things peacefully. They can talk calmly and resolve all issues. The guy was outraged by his friend's words and said he wasn't completely stupid and they betrayed him. Huang Wu turned around to Ling Chen and said that he had used the ring to cut the flagpole and had planned everything in advance, except why. Ling Chen took Huang Wu by the throat and said that he was the only one who could understand him and his true nature. And Huang Wu's true nature is to be a villain, said Ling Chen, clutching the guy's throat. Ling Chen asked Huang Wu to press the button and make himself known to this world. But then Ling Chen was flown into the back by another guy who pushed him off his feet, and Huang Wu too. An indignant Ling Chen asked what was going on and added that he had finally reached the tipping point. It was a battered Ye Mu, he told his friend in a trembling voice to get the hell out of here quickly. Behind Ye Mu was a tall man wearing a cloak. He walked slowly and intimidatingly. The guy was heading towards Ye Mu and Ling Chen. He had a cigarette in his teeth, and his appearance was very intimidating. When the man passed the hooligans under the rubble, they thought he was a police officer and asked him for help. One of the hooligans guessed it wasn't a cop and asked his friend if he was completely stupid while the man pointed his arm in their direction. The man blasted the hooligans under the rubble with his ring and went on his way. Huang Wu stood there perplexed by all this. He was confused and very scared. The man with a cigarette in his teeth continued to stare at the school children, eating them up with his gaze. Ye Mu could hardly stand on his feet and asked the strange man what he wanted from them. The man decided to give an answer to the guy's question, not with words, but with a kick to the head of the already battered Ye Mu. The schoolboy flew the other way away from the man. His punch was very hard indeed. The man walked over to Ling Chen, who was sitting on the floor, and asked if he was trying to block the passage. Ling Chen marveled at the man's actions and said that it was simply amazing. He grabbed the man's arm and said he didn't think Ye Mu was dead, and asked the man to kick him again. The man showed indifference, and replied that he didn't care if the schoolboy was alive or not. Ling Chen took the villain in his arms and said that he knew that he was the one who planted the bombs and caused chaos here. He assumed that the villain took a group of people and destroyed them together, and then dressed up in a policeman's costume to check the remains. Huang Wu stood frightened and didn't realize what had just happened. He repeated the words, "Dress up and kill." Ling Chen told Huang Wu to listen, for this knowledge would be useful to him in the future. Ling Chen patted the man's chest and said that there are 3 reasons why such people wear a cloak. Firstly, it's more convenient to hide weapons, and secondly, the cloak develops coolly in the wind. And thirdly, you can always put the target's photos in your pocket. Ling Chen himself found the photo and took it out. Ling Chen upset Huang Wu and said that he was the one in the picture, while the high school student himself was trying to figure out who he could have messed up so badly that they wanted to kill him. Ling Chen suggested that the guy should ask the assassin about it right now. Most likely it is not him who wants to kill him, but his boss, and this man just wants money. Although for an assassin, he is kind of tight-lipped. The cloaked man pointed his bracelet towards Ling Chen and shouted at the man to shut up. Ling Chen was not afraid and snatched the bracelet from the assassin's hands. The assassin cried out that his blaster had been stolen and looked at his empty hand. Ling Chen looked at the blaster and thought that this was some kind of joke. He asked the assassin, "Is he really using an outdated weapon?" Killer said he had no money at all. That's why he uses this weapon. Ling Chen asked the assassin how much they paid to kill in this era, to which the assassin showed him 2 fingers and said that it was a lot. Later, the man said that his boss was looking for young talents and they would love for the guy to join them. Ling Chen said that he was a little busy right now, but asked for a business card for the future. The man pulled his boss's business card out of his raincoat and remembered that he had forgotten to introduce himself. But then something interrupted him. He was killed by a bullet that went straight through his head. The guy looked at the spot where the bullet had been launched from, and was a little shocked at the killer's death. A girl in high heels walked towards them and said that she didn't like intriguers. Zhou Zhang was taking too long, although she would have killed this kid in 3 seconds. But the beautiful girl was not particularly upset that she had killed Zhou Zhang. The new assassin stood with a gun in front of Ling Chen and said that Zhou Zhang's reward would now be his. Just then a pink spider web flew from the girl's hands toward the boys. This web tied Huang Wu to the wall. He was the target for the hitman. The girl ordered the guy to obey and not to move. Otherwise she would have to punch him in his smarmy face, and then the pictures of the remains in the report would turn out very ugly. Huang Wu was at the limit of anger. He asked the girl not to say much and just kill him if she wanted to. The girl brought the muzzle of the gun to Huang Wu's chin and said that if he wanted to die very badly, she would grant his wish. But then the beauty was distracted by something. Something from downstairs was bothering her. Ye Mu grabbed the girl's leg to stop her from killing Huang Wu. The assassin girl crouched down to be close to Ye Mu and asked the one who really wanted to save her friend. She squeezed the guy's ribs and noticed that his ribs were broken and his right arm was completely immobile. The girl flirted with the guy and said that after dealing with Huang Wu, they would have great fun with Ye Mu. The guy tried his best to squeeze the girl's leg to stop her in any way. She sensed it and said it wasn't okay to do that anymore. She slammed the guy's face into the floor with her hand to get him to let go of her leg and let her finish the job. Huang Wu watched her beating Ye Mu and yelled for her to stop. The girl asked the beaten and exhausted Ye Mu to unhook himself from her leg and cradled his head with her knee. Huang Wu was even more afraid for the life and health of Ye Mu, who was trying to save him. Yemu was defeated but still didn't give up. He said in a trembling voice that he wouldn't let the girl go. The girl continued to flirt with the schoolboy and said that because of him she really could not hold back. She lifted the guy's arm up and continued to press her knee against his head, his arm starting to crunch. Huang Wu couldn't just look at it and shouted at the girl to stop. The strapped guy asked Yemu if he expected the high school student to be grateful to him. He also wanted to tell something about himself, but he was interrupted. And interrupted by Yemu himself, who resisted the hitman. He said he hated Huang Wu. Yemu hates people like Huang Wu who hurt innocent people, but he doesn't think the bully should be killed. The girl lifted the guy's head up to her and asked the guy what he was going to do in that state. Yemu said he knew he couldn't do anything, but someone else could. Standing behind the girl who didn't understand what was being talked about was Ling Chen, who was customizing the past assassin's bracelet. The guy adjusted his bracelet and fired a shot in the direction of the killer girl, and there was a loud and powerful explosion. Ling Chen said that if the girl wanted to embezzle the reward, then she would have said so, instead of obfuscating her motives. Compared to the previous uncle, she is too thorough. The girl flew into the wall and made a hole there. Huang Wu looked at this and thought that she was already dead. Huang Wu listened to the words of Ling Chen, who said that he was not the only one who was so abnormal, and if he compared to himself, there was nothing abnormal about their abnormality. Ling Chen continued and said that if we talk about truth, it comes with high and low values and flaws that cannot be divided into black and white. The guy pointed the beam from the bracelet towards Huang Wu and said that it was better to divide into someone who was strong and someone who was weak. The guy shot the web that restrained Huang Wu and chained him to the wall. Huang Wu wanted to say something to Ling Chen and started to untie himself from his confinement. Ling Chen patted the guy's shoulder and said that he had never thought that Huang Wu had made so many enemies that money was being paid for his death. And Huang Wu himself asked about the notes of pleasure in the guy's voice. Ling Chen put his foot on the body of the lying Yemu, asked him if he was alive. Yemu didn't answer. He was clearly powerless to do so. He couldn't even move. Ling Chen bent over Yemu's body and thought that maybe it would be better to finish the guy off right now and blame it on that woman. Behind the guy's back, a new pink-colored web was already flying at him, which should have bound him. Ling Chen's ring fell and flew away from him. The girl got up from the ruin and said that guys really like to put up a fight. The girl wiped the blood from her face and explained to the guys that the lives of naughty men had no value. The girl pointed the barrel of the gun at Ling Chen and said that she would kill him first, and then she would have some fun with that cutie. But then something hit the girl's shoulder and hurt her, causing her to stop. Killer held onto her wound and looked at the guy who had stopped her from killing. It was Huang Wu. He said that from the moment she appeared, she had been trying her best to make a damn thing out of herself, but she could just stop killing people for money. The guy only added to his words that it was too humiliating. Yemu and Ling Chen were netted, and Huang Wu thanked them for helping him figure out why he was always dissatisfied. The guy pointed the ring towards the girl and said that one should not harm innocent people. He also added that she should be punished for it. Ling Chen still didn't understand what the guy meant, and while untangling himself from the web, wanted to figure it out. He looked at Huang Wu and didn't recognize him as the villainous H from the future. He tried to save face, and kept thinking about what had just happened to them. But eventually his eyes widened in surprise and he realized he couldn't make sense of what had happened. The first shot from the ring, Huang Wu missed the girl. The second shot also flew into the milk and the girl was unhurt. The assassin girl was too fast and dodged shots like she was out of practice. Huang Wu was not particularly experienced in firing such devices, so he was surprised from how a girl who had just woken up could move so fast that he had no chance to aim. The girl walked right up to the guy and said it was her turn to attack. She punched Huang Wu right in the stomach, which even made Huang Wu's mouth bleed. She then prescribed him a powerful uppercut, after which the guy's head nearly fell off his body. After she kicked his head like a soccer ball, she beat him without much exertion. Huang Wu was beaten up and grudgingly stated that some woman would eventually be able to beat him up. Huang Wu shouted out to the girl and asked her, after all her actions, how would he be able to let her go? The girl with a single gift kick sent Huang Wu to the other end of the corridor. His friends looked on regretfully. Ling Chen thought that while Huang Wu was in the offing, he needed to decide how to get rid of Ye Zimu. The first option was to just finish him off immediately, and then blame it all on the weird killer Baba. After all, he's just a high school student now, and if she did tell the truth, no one would believe her and take her for crazy. At first glance, killing Emu is the best solution, but there are a lot of risks involved. First, there may be surviving wireless surveillance cameras in the hospital. Second, there could be potential witnesses who could testify against the guy. And there's no prints on the murder weapon from the strange killer. Of course, the goal will live up to expectations, and it will be worth it to finish off Yemu. But if he's uncovered, the guy will rot in jail for a long time and may die soon. After thinking for a bit, Ling Chen realized that there was only one option, and that was to kill Yemu by the hands of this strange woman. However, now the girl is just a nuisance. We need to stir her up, judging by her character. She will kill Huang Mao and just run away. It's time to repent for all the years of hate, thought the guy, and the girl was already loading the gun. Ling Chen stood up and told the assassin to stop, his voice sounding loud and confident. Yemu was still lying there looking at his brave friend trying to contradict the assassin. Ling Chen said that the girl can't just kill an innocent person. He and his friend, and especially his friend Yemu, won't let it happen. He definitely won't let the guy be killed. Ling Chen thought to himself that he was a born actor since he could lie so believably. The girl didn't really take the schoolboy's words seriously. She didn't see them as a clear threat and was just going to play with them. Yemu held onto his injured arm and turned to Ling Chen. He wanted to say something. He was touched by the guy's words. He was glad that Ling Chen was able to accept him as a friend, especially with such a sense of justice. Ling Chen asked his friend if he could stand on his feet and received an affirmative answer. Ling Chen took hold of Yemu's injured arm and told her to be a prey for a while. After all, he must have the urge to kill. After all, he righted the arm of a guy who was screaming in pain. The girl was getting bored of watching two guys helping each other and holding her back. Yemu couldn't be happy to have his arm repaired, and the hit woman called out to the two guys to draw their attention to herself. The girl fired her gun and added that these two were really pissing her off already. The black balloons surrounded Yemu and Ling Chen, who were expecting the bullets in the girl's gun instead. The balloons were flying very fast towards the guys. Halfway through their journey, they had already turned into little robotic spiders. Yemu was very much frightened by these robots, while Ling Chen on the contrary looked at them with a smile. Yemu tried to discuss with his friend what they would do now and how to fight. Ling Chen immediately lied that he was afraid of spiders to avoid helping Yemu. Yemu assured the guy that he could leave the spiders on him, while Ling Chen himself should look for a way to attack the girl. At first, Yemu was doing a great job of fighting off the little spiders that were jumping on his clothes. Later they were able to stun him a bit, and there were already quite a few of them on the guy's body. After a short while, the guy's entire body was covered in robotic spiders that Yemu couldn't fight off. Ling Chen purposely threw more and more electronic parasites at his friend, pretending that he was doing it casually. But then Yemu grabbed his friend's hand as if he suspected him of something. He asked Ling Chen not to panic. He also assured the guy that everything was fine and they would succeed. Ling Chen was startled and heaved a sigh of relief. He thought that he had been able to be exposed. Yemu came up with some plan and saying that he would do it now. He took hold of the curtain. The guy pushed all the spiders away with one sweep of the curtain as if they didn't even exist. Also, Yemu tried to cheer up his friend and said to just trust him and everything will be fine. The girl was fed up with all the guy's attempts to resist and said the mission was taking too long. If the boss finds out why she was delayed, he won't be happy. She said she'd better get this over with quickly and swung her arms. All the spider robots have malfunctioned and shut down. But after a couple seconds, they turned on again and shone their red eyes. The guys stood there not understanding what was going on. Yemu thought that they had already managed to defeat the villainess. The spiders began to gather into a huge pile that glowed brightly with a red light. Ling Chen didn't know how to choose the right words and asked Yemu, how would he propose to fight this one? In front of the guys stood a huge robot spider that was much bigger and taller than the two of them. The new robot glowed bright red and clacked its teeth very eerily. The huge spider stood over the guys and crackled eerily, preparing to attack. Ling Chen remembered that such a toy was only a pile of useless junk in the year 2036. The guys came back from being hit by the huge spider's paw, and Ling Chen realized that in 2019 it wasn't such a useless thing. At the time, the guy went to high school and spent days on end beating himself up, and it turns out at that time they were already using similar technologies. Yemu watched as Ling Chen fought off the spider's attacks and shot at its paws and thought that this was very cool. The guy kept damaging the huge robot to incapacitate it. He evaluated the spider's design, titanium alloy, wireless remote control terminal, and nuclear reactor power. This thing would have no problem finishing off Yezimu, but who knows? Maybe Ling Chen himself would have to join this fate. The guy looked at the spider and the girl controlling it and thought, should he give up or go all the way? Yemu distracted Ling Chen and asked the latter to distract the assassin for a while. He would be right back. Yemu asked please do it and said that Ling Chen would do well. The guys were able to make a slit between the legs of a giant robot spider. Ling Chen tried to stop his friend who had rushed straight into the center of the huge robot. Yemu himself had already gotten close to the assassin. He took advantage of the moment while Ling Chen distracted her. The girl was a little wary and thought she might lose now. Because of that, she fell behind Ling Chen and put a huge paw between herself and Yemu to push the guy away. Right in front of the girl, Yemu managed to grab onto Huang Bu's exhausted body. The wounded guy asked if he was dead, but Yemu said that as long as they were alive, he asked him not to go out of here in any way while they distracted the spider. Huang Wu didn't understand what kind of spider he was talking about, and when he raised his head higher, he was very much frightened by such a huge machine. He almost fainted, and Yemu looked towards Ling Chen, who was supposed to distract the monster. Ling Chen didn't waste any time either, and started advancing through the giant spider's paws. The boy grabbed the spider's paw and realized he had just been nearly crushed. But inside Ling Chen found something. He decided to remember what it could be. The guy learned that the part he saw was an inertial sensor. He grabbed the spider and said he would find a way to escape now. Yemu saw his friend in the monster's clutches and rushed to his aid, leaving the injured Huang Wu behind. Ling Chen fell off the robot spider directly onto the floor, making a crack there. Yemu immediately ran to his friend's immobile body. He asked for the guy's forgiveness. He shouldn't have left him there, but he wanted to help Huang Wu and save them both. Ling Chen told Yemu that he was always like this, wanting to save everyone and help everyone. But there was always not enough strength for everyone, and in the end he can't save anyone. Ling Chen continued, saying that Yemu couldn't even save himself. The picture of the spider on Ling Chen's bracelet lit up. It was red and glowing brightly. Yemu held his friend's body in tears and grimaced and said he had no strength. The girl thought to herself, how are those two still moving? Here the spider extended its stinger toward the friends who were trying to help each other. The sting was already touching Yemu's back as he mourned for his friend. It came closer still and was getting ready to finish the guy off, finally. But Yemu sensed it and grabbed the robot. He unfolded the sting of the spider and swung. Surprised Ling Chen stopped pretending to be dead, he thought that this would already be the end for Yemu. Yemu threw the spider directly at the female assassin, thus pinning him to the floor. Ling Chen was dissatisfied. He faked the sensor readings, pretended to be dead to attract Yezimu's attention, wanting to surely finish him off with one blow. It was the perfect opportunity to finish Yemu off and blame it all on the strange woman. An exasperated Ling Chen wiped the blood from his face and thought that he still had another year after all. The guy has one more year to kill Yezimu. At this time, Yemu was straightening up the robot as if he was playing with it. He wasn't particularly tense. The guy looked at Yemu and realized that his strength had already manifested. Ling Chen clenched his fist and prepared to strike the annoying Yemu. He started to press his bracelet to shoot straight at Yemu. He imagined how he had fought when he was a Panlos and the hero Yemu. Ling Chen pointed his device directly at Yemu, who was heading in his direction. The device began to make some sounds that said it was about to fire. Ling Chen was finally able to fire the bracelet directly at Yemu, who had just defeated the spider. Ling Chen looked towards Yemu, who he had just shot at with his bracelet. He awaited his friend's death and hoped he was finally done with his main mission. But to the guy's great surprise, Yezimu emerged from the dust and ruins alive and almost unharmed. Ling Chen decided it was worth another try and shot at Yemu again. The guy's face was visible through the dust and ash that the bracelet shot had created. Yemu's body was burnt and torn, and the guy looked at Ling Chen with blue eyes and a bare torso. Ling Chen realized that he couldn't kill Yemu right now and thought that killing him wouldn't be the problem. All the things and weapons around Yemu began to rise into the air as if he was controlling them with the power of thought. This time, even before reincarnation, Yezimu's superpowers also suddenly awakened and he fell into an unconscious state, his energy spilling out, and leveled everything within a 2-kilometer radius. The guy thought, and watched everything explode around him. Yemu grabbed Ling Chen's arm and took hold of his bracelet so that he couldn't harm him anymore. The guy squeezed Ling Chen's hand and looked at him with his empty blue eyes. He held on tight to the bracelet and ended up crushing it, the weapon shattering into crumbs. And after that, he held onto the guy's bare arm from which the bracelet had just come off. And then the story shifts to a time where grown guys are drinking beer and Ling Chen asks his friend why he decided to become a superhero. Yemu explained that after he got his powers, he took it upon himself to save the world, but to be honest, he was prying long before he got his powers. Yemu also said that he is not as selfless as he seems. It was all created because of a selfish child's little desire. The story returns to the present. Yemu is holding Ling Chen's hand and he resists. Ling Chen thought about the fact that he couldn't escape now, but he should at least try. He tilted the superhero's head and whispered some sort of password to him. The boy with the blue, glowing eyes began to hold his friend's hand more easily. After a few seconds, his eyes stopped glowing and returned to their normal position like all humans. Yemu stood with a bare hummock and looked at Ling Chen, not understanding what had just happened to him. Afterwards, the guy fell straight out of Ling Chen's hands onto the floor, as if his strength had left him. Ling Chen stood over his friend's body and tried to figure out if he was alive or not. The guy thought about the fact that he'd finally gotten it right. Ling Chen stabbed the guy's hand with a knife and thought about the long years of failures and defeats. Had to even pretend to be his best friend. Everything that Ling Chen had gone through, everything he had to lose was just for this moment. The guy saw the blood flowing from Yemu's wound and realized that he was about to succeed. Ling Chen couldn't be happy that right now, he would be able to fulfill his main mission. He couldn't believe his luck and started screaming and laughing all over the hospital from the fact that he was about to end it all. He pointed the shard straight towards the powerless guy and had already said goodbye to him. But then the guy's murder was interrupted by the police, who asked everyone not to move and pointed a gun at the guy. Ling Chen assessed the situation a bit and still changed his mind about cutting Yemu. He tossed the sharp shard aside after the policeman's words. Ling Chen started waking up his classmate and saying that the police had come and were about to rescue them. The officer repeated twice into his radio that medical assistance was now required on the second floor. An ambulance was already parked in the street next to the ruined hospital. Inside, the nurse asked Ling Chen where he was still in pain, and he pointed out the places of pain. The guy was frustrated and depressed. This was the best chance to kill Yemu in all 35 years. Would it really end like this? There's no way he couldn't kill Yezimu. The boy went back to his memories, where Yemu said that looking back, he remembered that after the first activation of his abilities, there was a period where he didn't feel any changes. Yemu apologized that he talks a lot, especially about himself when he drinks, but Ling Chen didn't care. Ling Chen sat and thought of one thing, that he was having a drink with Yemu, only to find out his weaknesses. Yemu told Ling Chen that he was a wonderful friend. His words were real and came from the heart. Ling Chen replied that he was aware of it. The guys continued to sit and drink, but their shadows showed Ling Chen swinging his knife, and the wine of such a shadow was a moth that sat on a lamp. The 5th of November 2019. Today is the 12th day since Ling Chen returned to this year. The guy's uncle has not been at home for 3 days. Hiding from debts, Ye Zimu is recovering from an incident in the hospital at home. In Ling Chen's room, the alarm clock that was supposed to wake the guy up for school rang. A ring shot flew in on the alarm clock and destroyed it in splinters. The sleepy guy lay in bed and realized to himself that his life was now wildly boring. Aunt May holds out the boy's petticoats and asks him to put them on, for it is getting cold outside. Ling Chen says he's not cold, but Auntie protests. In response, the guy still stubbornly stands his ground and says he's not cold. Aunt May doesn't like the guy's stubbornness and tells him that if he doesn't listen to her advice, he'll end up in a hospital bed when he's older. But the guy still denies his aunt's words. The woman threateningly told the guy that she was counting to 3, but Ling Chen didn't care and replied that even if the woman could count to 100, it would still be useless. Ling Chen turned towards his aunt and thought that he was after all Panlos, the #1 villain in the world, and he was being asked to wear loincloths. Auntie raised her hand at head level and spoke loudly once. The woman's tone rose and her look was more threatening. She counted to 2. Ling Chen still put on the pants his aunt offered him, and he was already walking to school with Jiang Xiao. Jiang Xiao told the guy that he had a split personality, sullen Xiaoling and irritable Xiao Chen. He had exhausted himself to the point where he was ready to go to the hospital, but suddenly there was an explosion. The girl added that it doesn't roll. It doesn't explain the fact that Yemu was also there. Is it possible that he was also going to the hospital? Ling Chen at this moment didn't understand how he deserved such a thing. He was already tired of listening to the girl. The action shifts to Beiwan High School, 4th science class, sophomore year. In Ling Chen's class, there are only 67 students in his class, in the entire school. There are about 5,000 students. In the classroom, 2 guys were discussing anime. A girl was talking about some boy, and the 2 guys in the back of the class were dividing the schoolwork equally, and Ling Chen thought they were all stupid. Ling Chen continued to ponder that maybe he really didn't deserve a life full of experiences. After all, he only had one simple desire, and that was to kill people. Jiang Xiao didn't get off the guy's ears and kept telling him something. This time he suspected him of getting carried away and executing his plan at the amusement park. And unfortunately, he was noticed, and the poison that was injected into his body made the guy younger. No wonder Ling Chen has become a better student. After all, he is actually already 35. The guy could not listen to her, and said that this was not the kind of impression he had in mind. Ling Chen was considerably annoyed, and asked Jiang Xiao if she was done guessing, and if so, let her be kind and shut up. The girl didn't like the fact that Ling Chen wasn't listening to her, so she looked disdainfully in his direction. Just then, Jiang Xiao charged the guy that just as she thought he was hiding something from the girl. Ling Chen asked, "What exactly?" Jiang Xiao said that although the guy was quiet before, he was easy to read. In the past 2 days, Ling Chen started talking more and it became harder to read him. The guy imagined Jiang Xiao from the future and was surprised from the fact that the girl was already very perceptive at such a young age. Ling Chen asked his girlfriend to talk less and asked if she really thought she could read minds. But the girl denied it and therefore asked further to the guy. He took Ling Chen's cheeks and brought him closer to him, then asked, "What exactly happened to him?" Ling Chen looked straight into the girl's eyes. He had not done or said anything so far. Ling Chen replied that he was just thinking about how pathetic he was before, after which he lowered Jiang Xiao's hands from his face. Had no feelings, with the constant feeling that life was hateful and dragging him into the abyss. But Jiang Xiao always knew what the guy was thinking about, just because he was thinking about one thing. Why was he alive? Jiang Xiao wanted to tell the guy that she never thought he was pathetic, but he interrupted her and said that everything was fine now and he didn't think so anymore. At least he's not someone who should die, Ling Chen thought to himself with a smirk. In the school's gymnasium, you could hear someone practicing there, and very intensively at that. Huang Wu did push-ups and tried to keep himself in shape after the incident in the hospital. Just then, Ling Chen appeared in front of the athlete, who appeared to have come specifically to the guy. Ling Chen asked Huang Wu if he remembered the person who was going to kill him. Huang Wu replied that he had already told the guy 800 times that he didn't know who he was. Ling Chen sat down next to him and started questioning the guy about whether he had overheard someone's news. Maybe found a strange disc or technological equipment, or his family worked for some dangerous people. Huang Wu replied that the guy was talking nonsense. Ling Chen told the guy not to think that a couple push-ups would save him from the assassins, but Huang Wu replied that he just didn't want to be weaker than a woman. Ling Chen replied that for a first-class villain, of course, strength was important, but there was something more important. The guy pointed his finger at Huang Wu's head and added, "This one will be much more important." Huang Wu asked if Ling Chen meant a strong head, but the guy replied that what was more important was what was inside, namely the brain. Huang Wu stood up after the exercise and asked Ling Chen if he wanted the athlete to start studying. Let him better shut up. It wouldn't do any good anyway. Ling Chen was angered by the guy's words. He interrogated the guy about the benefits of studying. Ling Chen poked his finger at Huang Wu and said that if he didn't study, he would become a useless bandit. He wouldn't know the basics when his master sent him to kill in a guarded building. Once Huang Wu gains knowledge, he will become the #1 villain in the entire world. Huang Wu didn't really pay much interest to the guy's words and was already leaving. But an indignant Ling Chen asked why he had such an attitude and asked him to come back. November 5th, 2019. Today is the 3rd day since the hospital blew up. The guy was holding some kind of earpiece in his hands and remembered the quote, "Eliminate all impossibilities, and it doesn't matter how unthinkable the remaining ones will be." He remembered stealing that earpiece from the girl's corpse as the police and ambulance carried out the wounded. Ling Chen put the earpiece in his ear and thought that his life was very boring. Ling Chen asked the person on the other end, "Did the competition go well?" The man gave the call sign of the dead Kosovo mercenary, after which he asked who it was that was talking to him. Ling Chen thought about why he should have a little fun, and suggested that the man make a deal. Before becoming a villain, Ling Chen was an ordinary person, and thought that assassins were very mysterious. But when he got into circulation, he realized that they were all soulless and lousy. In the window of the house opposite where the schoolboys were warming up sat a sniper. His call sign was One Shot, as the nickname makes clear. He only uses 1 shot per target. The sniper sight was already on Huang Wu. The sniper takes the most convenient position to kill his target, and he always gets 1 shot. The man was already pulling the trigger. A click sounded, and there were a fraction of a second left before the schoolboy died. But then a human eye appeared in the assassin's scope, looking straight at him. Ling Chen dangled like a spider from above and plugged the muzzle of the rifle with his finger. The guy put some kind of round device in the man's silencer so he couldn't shoot. Ling Chen told himself that the snipers were easy to calculate, and the assassin began to nervously fold his weapon, realizing that he wouldn't be able to land a shot. An explosion rang out through the window of the abandoned building, and Ling Chen moved aside to avoid getting hurt. The kid got inside and remembered that he was also the one who killed him before he was reborn. A schoolboy walked on crutches down a dark alley, more like a slum. Behind the boy stood Mortira, champion of the underground boxing ring. In fistfights, she had no equal. The girl's boxing style is tough, aggressive, intimidating, and her power is enough to break a stone wall. In the summer of 2027, on vacation in Italy, Ling Chen was able to cross paths with Mortira. The girl took a swing at the schoolboy, but he dodged her blow and thought that now was not the time to be nostalgic about old friendships. Ling Chen took out something from his front pocket, a terrifying weapon to defeat the girl. The guy was holding the device in front of a startled boxer who didn't understand where the schoolboy could have gotten it from. The girl begged for mercy and begged the guy not to do it. Her device scared her badly. The scary weapon was a cat laser pointer, which the guy pointed at Mortira, after which a bunch of cats appeared behind him. All the furry animals immediately swarmed at the girl, who started running away in fear. Panlos exists to kill Yezimu, but once someone enters the villainous circle, then he must obey the law of the jungle. It is necessary to know the enemy and himself. Ling Chen petted one of the cats that didn't run after the girl, and said that the killers were humans too. And while murderers remain human, they also have their weaknesses to be aware of. The man in the earpiece asked the guy what benefit he was getting, and Ling Chen explained that if he hadn't rushed to hang up the phone last time, those two bums wouldn't have come out and embarrassed themselves. The schoolboy wants to talk about the deal. Ling Chen said that he wouldn't interfere with the game, but he also had his own condition about the sacrifice. The victim Ling Chen must choose for himself. The man asked how the guy knew about the game, since it was never made public, and essentially remained secret. The death game was called Kosovo. Ling Chen clearly knew something about it. It is a deadly competition within the company Kosovo, the purpose of which is to identify the most promising individuals and eliminate the weakest employees. On the day of the competition, organizing committee through Darknet announces candidates for the role of the victim. There are no rules in the game. You can even get rid of your allies if they stand in the way. The first person to kill a victim gets a medal, and 5 million as a cash prize. The man told the schoolboy that since he knew about the game, he should also know that he was the head of Kosovo, and no one dared threaten him. Ling Chen said that after the incident in the hospital, there has been no progress in the past 3 days. He also asked that it is related to the Kosovo boss. Can T find the guy? Ling Chen also did not hesitate to tell the man that he had already threatened him if he communicated with him like this. Kosovo's boss threw his phone to the floor in anger, whereupon it shattered. In front of him stood 2 of today's mercenaries who had failed the mission, and the man asked, "Now do they know who their opponent is?" One Shot didn't want to believe that he would have to admit that a high school kid had beaten him. If word got out about it, his career would be over. Mortira also stood in fear. She said that if anyone found out about her weakness, namely cats, she would never be able to get a job offer again. The mercenaries began to look amongst themselves and tried to remember what the guy looked like. The sniper said that although he didn't get a good look at his face, it looked like the kid was a nearly 2-meter-tall middle-aged man. Mortira added that his power was not even 3 times, but 10 times greater than her own. The portrait of the schoolboy loomed eerie. He appeared to be a cold-blooded killer for hire. The sniper guessed something and suggested that it might be an assassin hunter. Mortira immediately remembered that this legendary hunter had single-handedly finished off 300 assassins in just one night 10 years ago. A couple of frightened mercenaries were shot before they could even finish their guesses. The boss of the game held a gun in his hand and called the pair of mercenaries useless scum. Someone decided to disturb the man and opened the door to the room where 2 shots had just rang out. It was a little girl with bows on her head, she called out to the man, calling him daddy. The man sat down and reminded the girl that he had asked her to wait outside. He also asked her why she had come running here, and she replied that she was hungry. A father and daughter were coming out of a room where 2 corpses of mercenary misfits lay, and the man asked the girl what she wanted to eat. The lights in the room turned off completely and there was no one left in the room. But then the little girl decided to go back. She covered her eyes with her hands. She moved closer to the corpses, but still covered her face with her hands. She held out her palm to one of the corpses for something to recognize. The girl finally touched the dead killer's body. The girl saw the portrait of Ling Chen, the reason why these 2 had failed their missions. The little girl immediately realized that it was because of this guy that things didn't work out for them. The bell rang in the high school, which meant that the students would now begin class. There was a buzz in the classroom, and while the teacher was away, the children were laughing, talking, joking, and not paying attention to their studies. But then the teacher slapped her hand on her desk and asked everyone to shut up. She also added that this class was the noisiest in the hallway. The teacher said they had 3 important things to discuss. First, the sports games were starting soon, and the class representative would take care of preparing a list with names and scores. Zhang Xiao confirmed her teacher's words and continued to listen to her attentively, although she was a little frustrated by the extra work. Second, the school invited Professor Liu Bu to specially tutor physics-gifted students in order to prepare them for the physics Olympiad to be held in the future. The woman looked at the list and prepared to call out the names of the candidates, but something surprised her. She called them Ling Chen, the guy who right now was sleeping on the desk while class was going on. His desk mates who were nearby tried to wake him up, but all their attempts were even. Ling Chen continued to sleep and began to snore even louder and more revealingly. This emphasized his indifference to school. The angry teacher threw chalk at the boy and shouted his name again to wake up the schoolboy. Ling Chen caught the chalk without taking his head off the desk, as if he had done it in a dream. The boy tossed the caught chalk aside, yawned, and said he wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't interested. The teacher broke the second chalk in her hands and said that the professor had chosen that one. Otherwise, why else would she order him to participate? Just then, the door to the classroom opened, and there stood a girl with bows on her head walking inside the classroom. The teacher also remembered the third important thing. A new student transferred to them today. She skipped 1 class and is now 2 years younger than the others. She also told the students that they should help her get used to the new environment. The girl stood next to the teacher's desk under the interested stares of her classmates. The teacher asked the girl to introduce herself to the class to get to know each other a bit. The girl was a little nervous, and on the second try, she said her name was Chao Yi, and her zodiac sign was Capricorn. The teacher pointed her to a vacant seat in the last row next to the window, and said the girl could sit there. The girl headed to her new seat, and the teacher asked the children to open their textbooks to page 72. The new girl immediately turned her attention to the sleeping Ling Chen. She began to reach out to him. He didn't even have time to touch the guy, but apparently she recognized him. It was the one she'd seen when she'd touched the corpses in her father's office. Chao Yi fearfully withdrew her hand from the guy and hurriedly walked towards her desk as if she was scared of Ling Chen. After the lesson, the school started recess and all the kids came out of their classrooms and began to socialize amongst themselves. Little Chao Yi was still not subdued by Ling Chen. She followed him out of the classroom. She looked at her hand and thought of something. She wanted to touch the guy one more time. The girl once again reached out her hand to the back of Ling Chen's head to find out something about him. But it was as if the young man sensed it and dodged the girl's hand without even turning back. After Qiao Yi tried to grab onto the guy's back, but she couldn't do that either. Jiang Xiao approached the new girl and noticed that she was wearing gloves and asked if she was hot in this weather. Qiao Yi saw off the departing Ling Chen with a look, while Jiang Xiao continued chatting with the girl. She said that she was on the committee and had to take care of the newcomers. She asked how the girl was feeling and asked her to sign the list. Jiang Xiao tried to touch Qiao Yi's shoulder, but the newcomer moved away from the girl's hand. Jiang Xiao noticed this and apologized to the new girl for it. The guys from the sports team stood nearby and said that without Yazi carrying the team on his back, they shouldn't even bother with the competition. It was better to give up right away. Jiang Xiao's attention immediately shifted from the new girl to the guys. She shouted at them not to give up and put in more effort. Qiao Yi decided to seize the opportunity and walked away from the annoying girl. The girl entered the classroom and saw Ling Chen, who she was looking for, pouring himself water from the cooler. She tried again to touch the guy while he wasn't expecting it, so she reached out her palm to his back. Ling Chen had apparently expected something like this and intercepted Qiao Yi's hand. The guy moved closer to the girl so she could hear him better, and asked her not to use her ability to learn more about him. Afterwards, Ling Chen threatened that otherwise he would snap the girl's neck with those same hands. He moved even closer to the girl and whispered in her ear. Did she realize he was serious now? Qiao Yi was slightly startled, and her knees shook at the guy's words that sounded threatening. He replied in a shaky voice and stammered that he understood. Ling Chen still had many questions after meeting the girl. He was confused. The man was walking down the hallway and encountered his subordinate, who pointed a gun muzzle at him. The guy said that everything in this world dies sooner or later, after which he shot his boss. Afterward, he added that his boss, Augustin Troyowski, was no exception either. It was a movie someone had seen on TV. After that scene came footage of a woman and a guy's voice saying that vampires and witches are destined to be enemies. But in your presence, I am not a vampire. Prince, continued the guy. Qiao Yi watched it all on TV with interest. The guy finished by saying that next to the girl, he is a simple man who loves her and reached out to her with a kiss. The girl thought about how she too wanted to experience this kind of forbidden love. She turned back around and pulled something out of her pajama pocket. It was an advertisement that said Beiwan High School was giving notice of accepting new students. And the action shifts to the day when Qiao Yi first came to school, but was a little late. She stood at the door where she was watching the entire class and looking for someone in particular with her gaze. The girl saw the man she was looking for and realized it was the guy she remembered from the mercenaries' memories. Qiao Yi immediately said that this guy makes her daddy mad. She kept listening to him sassing the teacher. Afterwards, she focused her gaze more on Ling Chen and said that this was daddy's enemy for life. Qiao Yi came up with the scenario of their love in her head. First, she will make the guy fall in love with her, after revealing her true face, and at the end, she will get her forbidden love. She liked the idea, but she realized that ending the story with love was very boring. The fourth step of her plan was to let her father kill Ling Chen once she had played around with him. Judging from the memories from the mercenaries, Ling Chen was arrogant and very evil, a real handsome man. But for some reason, in person he looks like an ordinary and unremarkable schoolboy. Ling Chen shifted his gaze towards the door to avoid listening to the teacher. The girl was startled by this and turned away slightly to avoid embarrassing herself even more. Qiao Yi listened as the teacher introduced her in front of the whole class and asked the children to help her to get used to her new surroundings. A lot of guys liked the girl. They thought she was very cute and beautiful. Qiao Yi stood with arrogant thoughts. She liked the looks of the guys on her, but she didn't dress up like this for them. But the man for whom she had dressed up like that was asleep and showed no sign of paying attention. The indignant girl stood there and to herself, she asked the guy to quickly notice Qiao Yi's cuteness. Qiao Yi decided to touch the guy to see what kind of person he was and how to approach him. No sooner had she placed her hand on the guy's back than she immediately noticed something about his appearance. Tense muscles, stiff corners of the lips, the typical state of a vigilant. But also the girl paid attention to his breathing and pulse. All of these factors indicated that Ling Chen had indeed fallen asleep. She remembered the one who had caught the chalk in his sleep and had been defiant with the teacher. Qiao Yi came to the conclusion that Ling Chen seemed very strong and was already preparing to touch him to find out more. But she never dared to touch the guy. She just ran back to her seat and said she couldn't do that. Her heart was beating like that. Qiao Yi was sitting quietly by the window at her seat during recess, writing something. She filled in the details about Ling Chen, his name, birthday October 24th, gender male, parents dead, excellent grades in science subjects, poor family environment, very poor. All of which indicated to the girl that the guy was a typical protagonist. She turned her attention to Jiang Xiao and said that there was one person in her reports that worried her. The protagonist's childhood love is Yi Jiang Xiao. She is the one who troubled Qiao Yi. The girl giggled and thought it was a pity because Jiang Xiao would be a minor character in her TV drama. Qiao Yi continued to look angrily and mockingly at Jiang Xiao. The girl found the guy near the water cooler and decided for herself that now was the time to get acquainted. It doesn't matter who Ling Chen is, she will still find the deepest and scariest secret in his heart and use it to tame the guy. Qiao Yi reached out her hand to the guy's back and thought that in the end, even if Ling Chen died, she would never know about it because she had a superpower. But then Ling Chen felt the girl's hand and reacted, grabbing it and pulling it away from him. Ling Chen reprimanded the girl and assured her not to use her powers on him, or else he would snap her neck. Qiao Yi's heart began to beat faster and she realized that something was happening to her body. The girl's body didn't obey her at all because of the feeling of forbidden love in her heart. The action begins on the school's athletic field where the kids practice, play basketball, and run around. Zhang Xiao attacked Ling Cheng, complaining that she is unlucky, because on Friday before the end of class, she has to hand in the list of participants in the sports games, and only 5 people signed up. The guy pointed out that it's already 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the girl is taking the competition too seriously. Zhang Xiao asked the guy if he had forgotten her main dream in life, and Ling Chen replied that the girl wanted to become famous. Zhang Xiao confirmed the guy's words and added that if she, as a representative of the sports committee, couldn't handle the sports competition, how could she participate in the student union election? Ling Chen suggested that the girl become a lawyer and defend the most harmful villain to become famous. Zhang Xiao thought that it wasn't a bad idea, and how did she not think of it herself? But then her thoughts were interrupted by a voice asking her to sign up for the competition. Zhang Xiao lit up at those words and pushed Ling Chen aside to see who was willing. It was newcomer Qiao Yi who had expressed her desire to support the girl and participate. The girl stayed up all night rewatching all the soap operas she had watched before and found out she forgot the most important thing. Feelings start to grow after you get someone else's attention. Ling Chen suspected that the newcomer was not doing this of her own accord, but only to get closer to him. Zhang Xiao immediately began to speculate where the girl could be enrolled. She didn't look like a nuclear pusher, maybe high jumping. Qiao Yi refused such an idea. She was offered the long jump, but she wasn't thrilled with that either. Maybe javelin throwing was to the girl's liking, but she didn't want to do that either. After going through all the possible options, Zhang Xiao decided to ask directly what the new girl could do. Qiao Yi replied that she was good at ballet and horseback riding. In the previous school, she was the best at it. Zhang Xiao understood that they didn't hold such competitions, so she looked towards the newcomer in surprise. Ling Chen decided to cut into the girl's conversation and told Qiao Yi that these were not her elite schools, and there was no such thing here. Zhang Xiao didn't like what the guy said about the elite school, and asked Ling Chen not to discourage the new students' enthusiasm. Zhang Xiao approached the girl and took her hand and said that this was the kind of positive attitude that the 10th graders in the 4th grade lacked. Zhang Xiao took the new girl away and said that if she didn't know what to do, she could try everything one by one. Then she said that she was very good at her studies, and if her friends needed a tutor, they could contact her. Qiao Yi stood in a circle and said that she wanted to try running first. Zhang Xiao replied that she was timing herself. Zhang Xiao stood joyful with a whistle in one hand and a stopwatch in the other. The girl thought that there was a change of plans at the last moment. She needs to win the sports game and win Qiao Yi over to her side. Qiao Yi also thought that the plans changed at the last minute. It's just running. There's nothing complicated here. Qiao Yi heard the whistle and shout march from Zhang Xiao and kicked off. She knew she had to make Ling Chen pay attention. But then the untied laces on the girl's sneakers played tricks on her, and she caught her other foot on them. The girl fell right on the circle. Zhang Xiao was very worried after all. Her popularity depended on Qiao Yi. The new girl herself with cute bows in her hair fainted. The girl's eyes opened already in the hospital, where she began to recover from the fall. Consciousness began to return to the girl, and she opened her eyes fully. Standing over Qiao Yi's bunk was Ling Chen, who was waiting for the girl to wake up. Qiao Yi was a bit scared by this situation. The guy asked her if everything was all right, and if so, he was leaving. Ling Chen didn't hear the reply and turned around, then prepared to leave the chamber. Qiao Yi didn't say a word, but grabbed the guy's shirt to stop him. She looked at him with cute puppy eyes and waited for some sort of reaction from Ling Chen. But the guy just sighed and didn't react in any way to the girl's attempts to seem nice. The girl continued to hold on to Ling Chen's t-shirt, and the latter asked her if she had settled a lot of doubts. Afterwards, Ling Chen asked the girl if she wanted to know the truth from him, and the guy said then she knew what to do. The girl reached out and said it was worth touching him. The guy replied negatively and said that it was worth opening his mouth and asking him about everything Qiao Yi was interested in. Normal communication is usually two-sided, but for you, it is just a one-sided need to remember, so you can even construct a complete sentence, said Ling Chen Qiao Yi. Qiao Yi asked the guy, does that mean he hates her and doesn't talk to her? The guy was flooded with memories when he was a villain and holding the dying Qiao Yi in his arms, which spoke volumes about the guy's feelings. The girl said in tears that her world was finally serene, but leaving Ling Chen behind had cost her dearly. Ling Chen looked into the girl's interested eyes and recalled her words from the future that she would be better off without the ability. Ling Chen explained to the new classmate that her ability was best not used. Qiao Yi continued to look at the guy and listen to what he was telling. After being told that her ability was best not to be used, she was a bit even upset. The girl pounced on Ling Chen with questions. She asked how he knew about her ability, why is going against her father, and how does he know so much about the assassin company. Ling Chen replied that he wouldn't tell. Qiao Yi rightly reminded that he had asked to ask questions, but the guy said that he didn't promise to answer them. Qiao Yi realized that Ling Chen had led her to tell her a lot of things about herself. Qiao asked the guy directly if he was going to kill her father. Ling Chen replied that not now, he didn't have time for that yet. Ling Chen bent closer to the girl and said that he would eventually take her father's place. After that, he simply walked out of the room and left his new classmate alone with new thoughts. In Qiao Yi's father's office, some guy stood in front of the Kosovo boss and handed him a picture. The boss clarified if this was the target the guy pointed out and got an affirmative answer. In the photo, as the target was Ling Chen, the story begins at Ye Zimu's house, where the guy is still recovering from an incident at the hospital. A guy with a broken arm was lying in bed. The room was very dark, and the atmosphere depressing. Then the sleeping guy's phone started vibrating. Someone had sent him a text. It was Jiang Xiao. She was asking the morale-killed guy how his injuries were, and if he would be able to compete. In Ye Mu's mind, there was only the bloody face of his friend Ling Chen, who he thought had been killed in the hospital. The guy wasn't really interested in the competition. He asked his classmate when Ling Chen's funeral would be. The girl asked if Ye Zimu's head was okay, then sent a photo of a live Ling Chen showing his middle finger. Ye Mu was sure of his friend's death and blamed himself for everything. But when he saw his photo, he jumped up from the bed. The guy was definitely relieved at the thought that his friend was alive. It cheered him up a lot. Ling Chen was riding in the subway car at this moment. He was thinking about why he was fighting against the Kosovo company. The guy was alone with his thoughts in a crowded train car. Ling Chen was answering his question about the war with Kosovo before he was reborn. That bunch of dumbasses that pushed Ye Zimu to gain superpowers. Before Ye Zimu awakened all his strength, these idiots died one after another like Calabash brothers about to save their grandfather. Eventually, after several deadly confrontations, he awakened all his powers and became an invulnerable superhero. So this time the guy decided to cut the problem at the root so that there would be no future difficulties. It may seem like this goal would be out of reach for 16-year-old Ling Chen, however. As previously stated, assassins are human too, and they all have weaknesses. All these invincible people are so different, yet they all have one thing in common. The guy quickly ran out of the carriage and ran the turnstile. Afterwards, he added that they all trusted no one. The guy had already run out of the subway and kept thinking about how one day a mysterious stranger appears who knows everything about Kosovo and their subordinates. They must eliminate him immediately. The only clue they have in their hands is the victim the mysterious stranger. Well, that is Ling Chen has chosen. At this point, Ling Chen himself has created a common enemy for himself in Kosovo. They now have a common interest. What's even more interesting for Kosovo is that the guy is at a disadvantage. As long as they think they are in control of the situation, then they won't kill the schoolboy. During the pursuit, the guy tripped and fell off his feet. He realized he was going to be safe either way. Ling Chen is confident that he can reach an agreement with the head of Kosovo. So the most important thing now is the opportunity to meet. So the guy took an innocent look and, covering his face, asked the mercenary to stay away from him. All Ling Chen needs to do is get caught. Afterward, he would be obedient and follow along with the man. The mercenary reached out to grab the guy who was innocently lying slumped over. But then someone from behind smacked the Kosovo mercenary, and he flew in the other direction away from Ling Chen. Ling Chen immediately recognized his savior and understood that his plan might now be in danger of being derailed. Ye Zimu, learning that his friend was still alive, decided to find him and now help him with his problems. Ling Chen was shocked by this. It had been a very long time since he had seen Ye Mu. Therefore, he wondered why the guy had come here. Ye Mu embraced his friend and apologized for what happened in the hospital. He added that if he hadn't acted so cocky, Ling Chen wouldn't have ended up dying. Ye Zimu told his friend with a smile on his face that he was glad that he and his health were fine. Ling Chen grabbed his face with his palm and wished that something would happen now, and Ye Zimu would leave this place. The Kosovo man had recovered from the blow and was fixing his nose and looking toward his friends. Ye Mu, despite his arm being broken, stood in front of Ling Chen to defend the guy to repel the thug's attacks. The man tried to kick the guy in the head, but the guy put up a block with his injured hand. After Ye Zimu delivered a counterpunch to the man, after which the fight continued. Ling Chen saw Ye Mu's advantage, so he asked the guys to stop fighting and pretended to be scared. During the fight, Ye Mu asked, first they wanted to kill Huang Wu, now Ling Chen, who are they and what do they want? Another Kosovo man was standing on the roof of the house where the fight took place, a gun in his hands. The blond man with the short hair took aim in the direction of the fight. He caught sight of Ye Zimu and fired, but the shot wasn't loud and was more like a whistle. A dart flew into Ye Zimu's neck, which should calm the guy down. The injured Yemu broke from his legs as if paralyzed and was left lying on the pavement. Ling Chen was very much afraid lest Yemu's abilities manifested, and he now became a superhero again. Ling Chen explained to the mercenaries that if they only wanted him, then let them leave his friend alone. The scumbags didn't listen to the guy and put bags over both guys' heads. Before finding himself head in the bag, Yemu muttered his friend's name with his last strength. Zhang Xiao at this time was trying to figure out why Yezimu was not answering her. What could he be busy with? Yemu woke up to some loud and nasty noise that was in the room. The guy was tied to a chair and tried to assess the situation he was in now. Yemu was tied to the chair very tightly and noticed that his hands couldn't move at all. Later, the schoolboy found the source of the unpleasant sound, which was fixed in the upper corner of the room. He asked why the sound was coming from there. Unexpectedly, Ling Chen, who was behind him, explained that strong sound waves were one way to make the captives feel depressed. Yemu asked his friend where he was, and he replied that he was right behind him. Yezimu turned his head back a little and asked his friend how long had he been awake. Ling Chen replied that he woke up exactly 4 hours, 23 minutes, and 16 seconds ago. Yemu couldn't fully see Ling Chen yet, so he asked him if he was also tied up and started trying to turn around. The guy saw something that made his forehead sweat and his pupils shrink. He was clearly frightened by his friend's predicament. Ling Chen was suspended by his throat. His hands were also tied, but the guy's face was calm. The only thing that kept Ling Chen alive was the chair that he was leaning on with one leg to keep the lash from tightening. Ling Chen asked the guy if he was shocked, also adding that none of this would have happened if Yemu hadn't shown up and started swinging his fists, and quite mediocrely at that. Yezimu felt guilty in front of his friend and bit his lip, thinking of how to help him. The guy advised to calm down first. Don't move. He'll think of something to help now. Ling Chen assured Yemu that he was already unmoving and calm as a boa constrictor, although the guy's situation was not good. Yezimu correctly pointed out that the ropes were very strong and his strength would not be enough to tear them. Yemu fell to the floor and started banging his chair against the floor and walls, hoping to break it, or at least break something. Ling Chen didn't like the idea and objected, saying that the guy was completely stupid and there was no point in hitting the wall. Yezimu, despite the remarks from Ling Chen, still continued his seizures on the chair. Ling Chen asked him to stop wriggling on the chair like a drug addict in withdrawal, and if the guy had enough strength, he could do him a favor and move the chair to the left. The guy was holding onto the chair with one right leg, while the other was left hanging overhead and the right leg had gotten very numb in the meantime. Yezimu agreed to help his friend, but asked him to wait a bit, because he would not be coming up for a while. With loud creaks and centimeter steps on the chair, Yemu began to make attempts to get close to Ling Chen. The guy crawled over to his hanging friend and started to move the chair to the left with his knee. Ling Chen tried to warn Yezimu not to accidentally knock over the chair and do everything carefully. No sooner had the boy finished speaking than the chair beneath his feet collapsed to the floor and he was left hanging from the noose. Immediately after that, the noose around the guy's neck tightened and cut off his access to air and Ling Chen began to suffocate. Yezimu's chair also collapsed on the floor as he tried to reach the fallen chair to fix things. Yemu grabbed the chair with his teeth and tried his best to lift it to save his friend. The guy still succeeded and was able to place the back of the chair under the leg of Ling Chen, who almost choked. Ling Chen was already on the verge of life and death, but he still managed to escape and greedily inhaled the air. Yemu also exhaled a sigh of relief when he realized that his friend's death had been avoided. Ling Chen finally drew a breath and even smiled slightly after this situation. Yezimu was also finally able to exhale with relief and even started laughing a little. A couple seconds later, both guys were already laughing in the closed room after the ridiculous situation. Yemu, who was lying on the floor, said that he had known Ling Chen for a very long time, but this was the first time he had seen him laughing like this. Ling Chen said laughing from one goon who pisses him and himself off. If the guy dies in Yemu's arms before he reaches his goal, he will never forgive him. Yezimu looked at his friend with a smile. He was glad that he had been saved. Yemu closed his eyes and memories came to him. The guy remembered how the bullies bullied and beat up Ling Chen. He also thought that a person without a purpose was just a vessel that could breathe. The vessel will eventually be filled with something, and it doesn't matter if it's by your design or not. Previously, Ling Chen was a vessel that was completely filled with emptiness. Yemu recalled helping the guy fight off the bullies and kept telling himself that he personally was the type of person who wanted everything to be filled with grandeur, because it suited his personality and his taste. But no matter what, Yezimu kept telling himself, who recalled how he had lifted Ling Chen up after the beating. No matter what, emptiness will always remain emptiness. At least Yezimu used to think exactly like this and thought that Ling Chen was an empty person. Ling Chen always left after bullying himself quietly and rarely spoke words of gratitude for being protected. The guy had already returned to reality and expressed his support for Ling Chen. He added that no matter what his goal was exactly, Yemu hoped that his friend could succeed. Yezimu added to his words that he was pleased to know that Ling Chen was finally alive. Ling Chen looked at his lying friend, and as if he had listened to his words. The conversation of the guys was interrupted by an open door from which a man's voice could be heard, saying that he had marinated the guys long enough. It was Kosovo's boss. When the man walked in, he said he was about to start the interrogation. The man walked slowly and confidently into the room to the captives. He was heading straight in their direction and said that for all 30 years this method of torture had been his favorite. He stepped on the bandage that Yemu had on his arm, and added that this method perfectly demonstrates the elements of proper interrogation. The man lifted Yezimu's chair up on its legs and told the guy that his life was in his hands, but they were connected. Afterward, the man stared in the direction of the hanged Ling Chen and said that the guy was smart enough. Ling Chen continued to hold onto the chair with his foot, and heard the question of whether he understood the man. Ling Chen decided not to say anything and pretended not to hear the man. The guy also added that the sound wave was too strong, and because of it, he couldn't hear anything the man was saying. The boss didn't like the dismissive attitude and looked sullenly at the cocky kid. The murderous ringleader found nothing better than to push the chair out of Ling Chen's legs so that it weighed on one hinge and could no longer be held on. Ling Chen immediately felt the full force of this interrogation method on himself and began to wheeze and gasp again. The man took hold of the guy's chin and asked if he looked like someone to talk to kindly. Also, Kosovo's boss told the guy that from now on he would have to answer every question he asked. Yezimu's eyes began to flood with light. He shouted out his friend's name and struggled to get out. From Yezimu's abilities, or rather even his strength, the strong rope that bound the guy started to tear. Boss Kosovo continued to chat with Ling Chen. He put the back of his chair back up and remarked that the boy was still a high school student and already someone wanted to take his life. The man had been asking his questions for a long time and now also asked the guy why someone wanted to kill him. Ling Chen still didn't want to cleave and turned on the fool, as if he didn't understand what he was talking about right now. The man took out his phone and said that the guy probably wanted to settle things the hard way, but Ling Chen abruptly became more cooperative and said that he remembered everything. The boy asked the man if he could protect him if the schoolboy told him everything. The bandit leader hesitated a bit. He looked at the face of Ling Chung, who was suspended on a noose and held on one leg. The boy's face was pitiful and frightened. He looked like a confused child who had gotten into a lot of trouble. The man decided to remember his daughter's fear of nightmares and realized that the other side of the guy is an ordinary 16-year-old kid. If you think about it like that, he is the same age as his daughter Chao Yi. Eventually, the man came to the conclusion that it wouldn't do any good if he killed him after all. Still need information about this guy. After all, Kosovo's boss had promised the guy protection. The frightened schoolboy asked the thug to come closer so he could tell him everything, but the man asked why. Ling Chen replied that some people are not at all what they really appear to be, alluding to Ye Zimu, who was lying next to him. The man did move closer to the bound guy, thinking he wasn't to be feared, and asked what kind of people could be like this. Ling Chen quietly approached and whispered in the man's ear that people like him were not what they appeared to be. The guy managed to untie the knot in his arms, which seemed almost impossible. He then swung like a swing and kicked the man in the head with both feet. The fleshy boss flew straight into the desk that stood in the very center of the room. Ling Chen finally came out of the rope shackles and noticed that many years had passed and the knots were still the same. He also asked the scumbag. The one realistically didn't know that they could be untied. The man quickly came to his senses and got angry at the sly guy. He yelled and asked the man how dare he play with him. The bandit was grabbed from behind by Yemu, who held him down and suggested that his friend run away immediately. Ling Chen apparently had no intention of going anywhere and asked his friend again where to run to. Ling Chen placed his hand on the nearest wall and recalled that he had hung here for 5 hours and put up with this guy's antics for half a day. It turned out to be an unusual slab, and the guy pressed it, then added that he was patient, waiting for the opportune moment. Ye Zimu and the mercenary boss were separated by a cage that fell from the ceiling and closed the man in. Already the man was already being held captive by Ling Chen, who was heading straight in his direction. The guy said the man has been investigating everything for so long, but still doesn't even know his name, and it's sad. The guy remembered his costume that he had in his past villainous life. The guy said his name was Panlos as he continued to present his suit behind him. Ling Chen was full of strength despite his long confinement, and indicated to the man that it was now his turn to lead the interrogation. The man said the schoolboy knows his strategy well, and now the layout of the room. He also said that Yemu and Ling Chen are both on the same team. But the man wasn't nervous or worried. He just pulled out his phone and said he had a backup plan for such an occasion. The boss dialed a number on his phone and he was promptly answered. There was a woman's voice coming from the boss's phone, begging to stop. The woman repeated this a great many times. Ling Chen immediately recognized his Auntie Mei in that voice, who apparently had also been taken prisoner by the boss. The man finished a short conversation on the phone and broke one of the sticks that covered the cage. Kosovo's boss left the cage and asked the guy if he thought if he could trap the man he would get an advantage. He later showed the phone and said it wasn't a simple thing in his hand. The phone began to dissolve and melt in the man's hands like ice on heat. The phone turned into a huge cord that wrapped around Ling Chen's neck. The man said he was indeed about to put the kid on a leash. Ling Chen's neck was completely wrapped around this thread, and it seemed like he had already been defeated. But Ling Chen remained calm and told the man that he must be nervous to go straight for the trump card. But in this situation, the schoolboy himself was the only hope for the man. The boss still didn't understand the guy's words and continued to keep him on a leash, unsuspecting. Suddenly, the thread started to break out of the thug's hands, and he tried to get a firmer grip on it, and the old bandit was carried upward by it. The man weighed in on the skyscraper, with Ling Chen standing on top of him, and said that the boss was not worried about the invisible enemy that was stalking him, but the fact that he was beginning to realize his suspicions. Here, Ling Chen took up his sword and prepared to cut the rope, saying that in this case, the scumbag had no intention of changing. Even the god of death couldn't save him. The fat man flew down from the skyscraper along with the severed ribbon, but still tried to grasp it with his other hand. The man fell right into the triangle that was the emblem of his Kosovo company as well. Ling Chen said that the man's enemy just knows about his stubborn character. That's why Panlos used this method and sent the schoolboy here. The boss himself asked the guy what he was going to do. Ling Chen held the sword on his shoulders and said that he would now negotiate. The opponents fought with swords, and Ling Chen said that in recent years, the company's orders had become increasingly difficult to fulfill. The information was leaked by spies inside the company, to the point where superpowers appeared, Ling Chen added. The boy swung toward the bandit and asked to voice what his opponent was guessing. The sword blade flew straight into the man's body, and the guy said, "Kosovo, your time is up." But the man was able to parry the blow, although the guy continued to criticize the company, and said that if they didn't change sooner or later, they would be destroyed. The man also decided to ask something. He was interested in the fact that even if everything was as the guy said, why would Panlos send a teenager like Ling Chen here? Already the man started attacking the guy and assured the guy that he had gotten rid of all the countless scorching rogues like Ling Chen. Ling Chen also did not let the punch reach its target and said that the man was making mistakes because of his arrogance. Ling Chen said that this teenager actually studies with his daughter Chao Yi in the same class. The man was frightened by such a fact. He was very worried about his daughter and frantically wanted to protect her. The guy managed to get the big guy on the floor, and he said he could pretend like he wasn't threatened. But if the boss hurt his aunt, the boy had already placed the sword next to the man's head and said that in case his aunt was hurt, he would destroy everything the Kosovo ringleader held so dear. Ling Chen also added that people like him do not throw words to the wind to further intimidate the man. The mercenary leader lay frightened, the guy's sword glaring at him, and he was already preparing to die. But then the epic brawl was stopped by the door to the torture room opening. A bald security guard walked in, eager to alert the boss of the big news. But when the guard saw the reclining boss and the two unleashed teenagers, he dampened his enthusiasm a bit. The angry boss rose to his feet and asked the guard who gave him permission to come in here. The bald man apologized and said he was wrong, but the matter was urgent. The boss took advantage of the moment when everyone was distracted and punched Ling Chen in the face. The guy fell to the floor after being hit hard, and the ringleader of the killers said as he walked away that the guy didn't have enough spirit and strength to threaten him yet. The guy lay on the floor and cursed himself. His plan had apparently gone awry. Originally, Ling Chen planned to use Panlos' identity to establish a connection with Kosovo, and then use the accumulated data to destroy them from within. The lad was used to Pangloss's carefree approach, and forgot to consider the factor of having a living aunt in this world. Yezimu approached the desperate guy and asked if he was all right. The boss stood in front of the guards outside the metal door of the room where the two teenagers still remained. The man's plans also went a bit awry, as he had originally planned to lure Panlos out, but he didn't expect to be threatened by some teenager. The man realized that this teenager was a villain to the core, and would only get worse as time went on. He told himself to forget about Panlos, for in time the existence of this child would become a real nightmare for Beiyuan. Either way, the guy constitutes a threat worth dealing with. The action is transported to a posh room where everything is shiny and looks very expensive. The pedigree cat noticed that someone had gone inside and immediately took notice. The guard entered the room and addressed the guy, calling him Brother Jin, and alerted the guy that his boss was looking for him. The guy at this point was smoking a cigar and had rings on his hands. Jin smoked a cigar and said that he understood the guard's words and would come over soon. But he also added that he's about to clean up the mess in his room and will definitely come over. A couple minutes later, the guy's hands, which were all gold, hit the desk in the boss's office. Apparently, Jin had already found out about what had happened to Ling Chen. He shrieked that he would have this puppy singing in 5 minutes. No more. The boss looked at the guy dubiously and asked the guy if he thought his ringleader wasn't that good compared to him. Jin confirmed the man's words about being better than his boss. He later added that that's why he had his eye on the boss's seat. He hopes to be the boss of Kosovo one day, and the ringleader immediately picked up on the fact that he had told the truth. The man later thought that was why he kept Jin on his side. After all, in this business, it was better to have someone who was open about his desires than a duplicitous bastard. The man said that if Jin is better than him, he has a great case for the guy. Jin interrupted his boss and asked about killing the guy. He also answered his own question that he could handle it without any problem. The boss cooled the ambitious subordinate's ardor a bit and said that he wanted Jin to let the kid go. A fast running could already be heard down the hallway. Someone was trying to escape this place. And the fugitives were Yezimu and Ling Chen, who somehow managed to escape from the interrogation room. The guys face-to-face ran together, trying to do things quickly and not get caught by anyone. Ling Chen noticed that Yemu hadn't spoken since the guy took out the door in the interrogation room. He asked what was his friend thinking about. Yezimu decided not to go around and asked his friend directly, "Is he panlos?" Ling Chen was interested in such speculation so much that he even turned around towards his friend. Yezimu continued by saying that he thought Panlos was a fictionalized identity of a guy, but his goal is not to negotiate but to destroy Kosovo, although Yemu still doesn't understand why he's doing all this. But further, the guy supported his friend by saying that since he fights those who harm innocent people, he needs to know why. Yemu just needs to help Ling Chen achieve his goal. Ling Chen was surprised by this stance of his friend. He expected Yemu to take offense or ask more questions. The guys had already run to the end of the hallway. They met no resistance on the way. But Jin's mohawk was already waiting for them around the corner, having been sent to let the boys go. Ling Chen was attentive and noticed that someone was around the corner, but he did not slow down his speed in running. The guy after the swing flew a straight leg straight at the thug's head to knock him off his feet. But Jin was ready for this, so he effortlessly grabbed the guy's leg and parried the blow. Jin immediately pushed Ling Chen back and he flew from a strong throw. But then Yezimu came to his friend's aid and punched the big guy right in the stomach. The opponents scattered to different sides and examined each other. The friends had a numerical advantage, but Jin looked huge and creepy. Over the earpiece, Jin was told that this brat Ling Chen had escaped. The guy said it was good, although he was against the boss's decision. Jin pointed his finger towards the guy and said that although he was against it, the boss told him to let Ling Chen go. Jin was a little confused and was pointing his finger towards Yezimu the entire time. Ling Chen decided to correct the big guy and asked if this was addressed to him. Jin realized his mistake and pointed his finger already at the right guy and repeated that although he was against it, the boss had ordered him to let the brat go. Ling Chen asked the guy why he was still standing here then. He also called him a dumbass and asked him to get off to the side. Jin didn't like being called a dumbass. He started having flashbacks from his childhood. At school, Jin was bullied by his classmates, calling him a dumbass because he couldn't cope with the test. And he was also called a dumbass by the college interview committee. Jin was beyond pissed off at such an insult in his direction, which apparently he had to hear often. He also remembered how the boss had asked him to let the guy go and didn't react to the outrage from Jin. Jin asked the boss what this guy had that he didn't and heard that Ling Chen, unlike the hitman, had a brain. He specifically got ticked off and started repeating what he kept hearing about brains, from everywhere and everyone. Jin took out his gauntlet and pointed it towards his friends, then hysterically asked why Ling Chen had become a villain if he had brains. The guys were standing right in the crosshairs of Jin's glove, who appeared to be preparing to fire. The guard decided to ask the boss if he already knew that the kid had escaped. Why did he send Jin to free him? The boss didn't say anything back, just smilingly wiped the slide of his gun. The boss's desert eagle had an engraving from the Bible, namely the ways of the Lord are inscrutable. Meanwhile, a loud and violent explosion went off in the hallway, raising a lot of dust and debris. Jin asked the frightened boys, what could be good about being smart? Jin continued, saying that the smart ones are weak and unarmed, alluding to the guys. He also added that he was different from them and started using his glove, which activated auto-targeting. Jin pointed the gun toward the boys and said that even though he had no brains, he had money. He fired his device, then threw his friends away from the center of the corridor. The guy pulled out some other gadget and assured the guys that he was about to show them the difference in strength between them. He slid the device into his belt and shouted transformation. Ling Chen recognized the toy and said that it was a nanofluidic amorphous armor, as far as the guy remembered. Then this thing should not be available for another like 10 years. Then at Jin's call, one of the guards brought a part of the suit to his hand. On the other side, the guard was also bringing his suit sleeve towards Jin. They started dressing the guy, all snapping and twisting to fold the suit on him. Jin was already fully dressed in his golden and flashy costume in which he was preparing to finish off his friends. The guys looked at the arrogant Zun like he was crazy. Meanwhile, the battlesuit was already starting to work and something could be seen turning on. A couple seconds later, the whole suit was glowing. It was brighter than the sun and it felt like it was about to explode. Jin shouted out thousands of rays turning into powerful blows and rays actually flew out of the suit. The corridor was further damaged. Jin's suit was indeed very powerful. Ling Chen, despite this, was able to dodge the blow and thought that if he was first threatened, then let go, then Kosovo was definitely up to something. The guy also remembered his aunt and thought that he had spent too much time here, so she might already be dead. Ling Chen was angered by such thoughts, and he clenched his fists from the anger and rage that was within him. But here, the angry fellow Ye Zimu patted his shoulder to calm him down. Ye Mu assured his friend that he could apprehend Jin and advised Ling Chen to take the opportunity to escape. Ling Chen didn't like this kind of support from his friend, and he took his hand off his shoulder. Ye Mu was a little scared of the guy and moved away from him. Ling Chen asked Ye Mu what he was carrying. He wants to sacrifice himself to look like a hero. The guy sent Ye Mu away. Ye Zimu reminded Ling Chen about his aunt, for she is in danger now. The boy reached out with his hand toward his enemy. He thought about what he needed to do. If Ling Chen was still Panlos, he would deal with this guy very easily and simply. But there was no aunt in that world, nor was there anything to be happy or sad about. That's why the guy forced himself to become Panlos, the first villain in Beiwan, to develop various weapons. Kill Ye Zimu. Ling Chen knew well that even if his friend died, it would not bring his aunt back, and now she was indeed alive. But ironically, because of Ling Chen in danger. Ling Chen briefly thought about who he was in the past and who he would become now. The guy got up from his knees and said that if Ye Mu sacrificed himself, it wouldn't stop Jing for more than a minute. Ling Chen suggested Ye Mu to team up, and the latter was clearly in agreement with such a suggestion. Ye Zimu stood beside his friend and asked, what should he do now? Ling Chen decided to himself that it was worth keeping Panlos. This guy was an idiot who couldn't even save his aunt. He took out a ring from his pocket and said, now Ling Chen. And Ling Chen swears that as long as he is alive, his aunt's death will never happen. Ye Mu ran to attack Jin in his powerful suit. The scumbag tried to hit the guy, but he wasn't so easy and managed to block the blow with his hands. Ling Chen had already approached from the other flank and asked the bandit if he thought he only had a problem with his brain. Ling Chen swung his fist towards Jin and mocked his sense of taste. He grabbed the paddle of the suit and said that with such a sense of taste, Jinya could never be a villain. Ling Chen's device was attached to the suit, so the wearer didn't even notice. Afterward, Jin was pierced by a very strong electric shock that was triggered by Ling Chen's gadget. The story shifts to the high school where the students are now taking classes. The teacher decided to leave the kids after the lesson and said she would finish after the kids had solved the problem. If anyone needed to go to the restroom, you could come out, the teacher added. But then the teacher was interrupted and startled by the loudspeaker in the classroom, which was reminding the 4th grade class in the second building that enrollment for the competition was coming to an end. Zhang Xiao held some tied-up poor guy in her office and kept saying into the microphone that while before you had to pass a physical examination, now you could sign up anyone. The restrictions had been lifted. The girl kept enticing the kids, saying they wouldn't lose anything if they signed up and didn't miss out, but the microphone was snatched out of her hands. The guy announced that Professor Liu Bu wanted to announce that the evening physics class was cancelled, and Zhang Xiao started protesting to get her microphone back. The guy held the microphone higher so Zhang Xiao wouldn't snatch it and prepared to give the reason for canceling the class. The reason was because of Ling Chen's absence from school. The professor withdrew from class because of this. Jiao Yi, like everyone else, listened to the loudspeaker with interest after hearing Ling Chen's name. The angry teacher stormed out to the professor and said that canceling class because of one student was extremely irresponsible. She wondered how to explain this situation to the student's parents. Professor Liu was standing on a chair and wrapping a noose around his neck. He was preparing to hang himself, and the teacher immediately ran to him. He was quite close and was preparing to grab hold of the man's legs to save him from death. But her hands went through the professor's body as if it were a hologram. The girl didn't calculate the force of her throw and fell right into the pile of books by the trash that stood nearby. She was a little banged up and strewn with papers, but suddenly she noticed something. She noticed the projector, which was what created the picture of the professor hanging himself and the note on it that said not to be disturbed. If anything went wrong, he was dead. A cab pulls up to the slum of the city where Ling Chen lives and stops. Ling Chen didn't even wait for a full stop and immediately jumped out of the door, then headed towards his house. Ye Zimu apologized for his friend to the cab driver and paid him himself, saying that Ling Chen had urgent business. Ling Chen began to look for anything suspicious around that could indicate the number of mercenaries. He examined the bars on the windows and realized that no one had touched them. They were still intact. There were no signs on the door either that would indicate a break-in or struggle. Ling Chen thought that if his release from Kosovo was an act of goodwill, then his aunt should be fine as well. Ye Mu asked his friend why he thought his aunt was at home, if, logically, she should have been kidnapped too. But Ling Chen asked his classmate not to talk nonsense. If they had his aunt, they would have brought her to him back in the interrogation room. Ling Chen shared his speculation. Kosovo people and his aunt should still be inside. Ye Mu objected. He asked why would they keep his aunt if the guy himself had already been released. Ling Chen said that Ye Mu can leave. Whatever happens next is his personal business and has nothing to do with the guy. Ling Chen started to open the grate to his room, while Ye Mu stood by the side and thought that the guy went home like this every time. Ling Chen himself wanted to take the right technique. But in general right now, Ling Chen is avoiding the thought of another possible scenario. He wants to believe that his aunt is alive. He thought about the fact that Kosovo might have let him come home to see his aunt's corpse. Yamu stopped the guy from opening the lock with his hand and wanted to cheer him up somehow. Mu told his friend not to prepare for the worst until he was sure. But then the front door to the guy's house creaked open and gave the guys a big scare. They were expecting to see Kosovo mercenaries. The boys were more than a little wary and prepared for the worst that could come out of the door. But Aunt May was there throwing out the trash and told the boys that they scared her a lot. Aunt May offered her guest a glass of water and held it up to his hands. He eagerly accepted. Yamu thought it was the first time he was at his friend's house and was looking for something to say. And Ling Chen regretted that he had planned so much and nothing had happened. Ling Chen was trying to figure out what was even going on. Why Kosovo hadn't done anything to his aunt. Auntie handed the guest the money and said she was sorry. Mu was confused and asked why they were holding out money to him. The aunt explained that judging from the guy's wounds, he was beaten up by her nephew. He is a child with a difficult character and does not get along well with other kids. She kept offering money and said that if it was not enough, she would think of something. Mu replied that the aunt misunderstood everything. Then Ling Chen came into the conversation and snatched the money from his aunt's hands and said that he didn't hit him and he was actually hurt too. The aunt asked what happened then. Her nephew never brought classmates home. Apparently the aunt began to guess something and asked the teenagers to wait a bit. She looked with an intimidating look towards Yamu and asked if he was the kid who beat up Ling Chen. Yamu again said that Aunt May had misunderstood everything. Ling Chen asked his aunt surely no one had come to their house. A rustle was heard at the door, and the aunt said that wasn't the man who had called her nephew home. Ling Chen got up from the sofa and covered his aunt with his body, then asked the man behind the door, "Who was he?" Out of the door came Physics Professor Liu, who came to the guy's house and told him he was finally back. In Ling Chen's hands was the knife that he took from the table. This time it was already real. He pointed the tip of the knife toward the professor, who stood fearfully nearby. Afterward, the guy threw a hard punch that made the red juice spurt out in all directions. Ling Chen just cut the watermelon, and his aunt was alarmed that he was doing it like that, as if he wanted to kill someone. All the guests and hosts were seated at the table. Aunt May held out a slice of watermelon to the professor and offered him a treat. Everyone was quietly eating watermelon except for Professor Liu. He watched Ling Chen, who he was interested in after that formula on the window at school. Ling Chen paid no attention to the strange guest and just continued to nibble on the watermelon. The professor's temper boiled over. He couldn't stand it and slapped his hands on the table. He stood in front of the guy and grabbed his hand that had a knife in it. He asked what he needed to do. "What does Professor Liu need to do in order for Ling Chen to attend his classes?" the guest asked. Ling Chen whispered and told the professor not to pretend. The guy knows that he is Kosovo's sixth man, and that recording with Auntie's voice was forged by him, processing her voice and editing it. The professor also whispered to the schoolboy not to think he wouldn't kill him right in front of his aunt. He also asked the kid to be careful with his words. His aunt wouldn't stop him. Ling Chen gazed at the tattoo that was under the professor's eye. Code 73, who would kill Kosovo in the future, and the first person to use a quantum weapon in Beiyuan. The guy held a knife to the legendary killer's throat and realized something for himself. This guy has always been the most respected villain to him. But the guy did not leave the thoughts. Why his idol is doing the errands of this stupid organization is not in 2019. This divine villain should not be engaged in research in Caltech. The guy realized his idol has no money for research, so he's pulling idiot money out of Kosovo. The professor himself also hesitated. He was trying to understand what this view was, as if his scientific work had been publicly criticized and refuted. The professor was trying to figure out if the guy was playing or trying to confuse. He also called him interesting. Ling Chen was wondering why such a legendary villain was pretending to be a teacher in their school. He had never seen him here before his rebirth. Ling Chen mustered up the courage to ask the professor what he was doing in Beiyuan Middle School. The professor explained that he had discovered negative particle nucleation not too long ago, and the coordinates of this data set, and all paths and routes led him to this very school. Ling Chen was trying to think of something. He was repeating to himself the professor's words about negatively charged particles. Yamu decided to pay attention to the guys and tried to understand what was going on. It felt as if teacher Liu Bu had nothing to do with it. Knowing Ling Chen's character, he would have made a move long ago. Ling Chen continued to hold the knife at Professor Liu Bu's throat and thought that perhaps the legendary villain was frightened. Mu decided to intervene in the conversation and reminded the teacher of the courses that were mentioned. Mu removed the knife from the teacher's throat and said that he too would go to the physics course taught by Professor Liu Bu.